Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Kathryn, are you going to work? Why is the department head late to the office? We used to get a little bit of a scolding, but now you're the one in the hospital learning tricks like that. There's order and discipline here. So put your feet in your hands and be there in 5 minutes, Angelina Victoria exclaimed unhappily. Special forces. Kathryn only opened her mouth to reply as the supervisor had already passed out. Of course, it's easy to say that. Own car has, and not some Zigolnanak, but a foreign car. Why didn't she come earlier? With resentment remarked the girl, hurrying to work. Kathryn tried not to think about the fact that today she again awaits a pile of troubles and responsibilities. Within the walls of the trading company, not as a manager, department head, or even deputy director, but just a technical cleaner. Whatever you want to call it. She herself called herself a fairy of cleanliness, and for a sense of inner comfort this definition was enough for her. Why be sad when every profession was important in its own way? This theory Kathryn adopted from an elderly janitor who cleaned the area near the office. Imagine, Kathryn, that one day there will be no more salesmen, plumbers, or us janitors. That's right, it would be an inconvenience. It's going to be a real inconvenience. Because every job is valuable, no matter how prestigious or not, said Peter Samuelson. Kathryn was fine with that explanation, especially if you take into account that in the recent past she worked as a nurse in the surgical department of the local hospital. Everyone in the personnel department marveled at the fact that she had left the medical establishment. Practically, she had not changed anything for herself. Why break the spears? She was looking for a warmer place. Doesn't sound like it, but there was a reason for the situation. And to remember it was unpleasant because the office of the company Hermes was located in the opposite part of the city. She had to get to her place of work by bus. The driver, a man of pre-retirement age, remembered Kathryn by sight and always greeted her with a slight nod. He didn't know where she worked, but he was respectful, realizing that her work was not easy. More often than not, Kathryn found herself in rush hour while traveling to work. The reason was the remoteness of the office from the apartment she occupied. If Kathryn lived a little closer, she would certainly walk. Why depend on a bus that was often late and arrived late? That was the case today. It wasn't the driver's fault. What could he do when the road was jammed to the brim? Plus the passengers were crammed in like herring in a jar. All because one of the buses broke down, and the buses were loaded on this trip. Who's to blame for that, right? No one. And then there's Angelina Victoria and her admonitions. It's like if she calls, Kathryn will show up the second she does. Whatever it was, the mood seemed hopelessly frayed. And it had to happen. Just one phone call, and Kathryn didn't feel like doing anything anymore. However, she was not used to. In the Department of Surgery, and more serious conflicts happened. Kathryn didn't survive anything. How else? If you pay attention to every offense, then the nerves are not enough. And then, who will help mom in the village? Unnoticeably, Kathryn plunged into a disturbing memory. From the outside, it seemed that she was sleeping with her eyes open. The bus meekly hummed the engine. There was the usual, barely audible murmur in the cabin, when several people, trying to maintain silence, mutter something to themselves that is understandable. Kathryn's father died on the river 12 years ago. Anthony Maxwell, the tractor driver, was so famous that people from all over the county came to him for help and advice. Everyone knew that if something broke, they had to go to Anthony. He would fix any mechanism and give it a second life, all because of his golden hands. A true master of his craft, Kathryn was still proud of her father, although he had no wealth, lived in modesty. Too bad he left too soon. Fate, there's nothing you can do about it. It was said that his mother, Kathryn's grandmother, Gypsy Fortune, telling about her son, you need to be careful. But Anthony took care of himself. He practically never bathed in the river, and he had never been to the sea. He had only seen it in pictures. In March, he forgot. He fell through the ice, but did not drown. I climbed out, clinging to the slippery ice like rock climbing. Where then was the severe frost that made the tractor driver shiver from cold. It was March in the yard. Winter, not wanting to give up its position, tried to cover the earth with snow and frost for the last time. But the power of the elements was at an end. The snow was melting. The frost was weakening. Everything was melting too, looking at the icicles growing right before our eyes from the roofs. Anthony Maxwell came to the river for a reason. He spotted a wounded she-wolf. From afar it looked like a dog, but when he came closer, he was stunned. The forest predator was lying on the ice. Behind him stretched a trail of blood. The poachers must have done their best. They'd been shooting in all directions since morning. Anthony went to the station that day to take a train to the city to get spare parts and bring pictures of hotels. But it turned out like this. Although the tractor driver fell into the ice hole, he saved the she-wolf. He crawled on his knees on the ice, trying not to pay attention to the cold in his stiffened fingers and toes. The she-wolf lay still, looking hopefully at the approaching man. How she realized that Kathryn's father wanted to help, God only knows. But she did not growl, and when the tractor driver approached, doomed to lower her head to the ice. Then Anthony saw what he had not noticed at first. The she-wolf was pregnant. That is, as the hunters in the village used to say. The wolf was pregnant. Anthony was not a veterinarian, but the size of the predator's belly told him that labor was imminent. He himself had recently had a mongrel dog in the yard in the same situation. Kashtanka was almost as big as a she-wolf. Bullets of hunters hit the predator in the back and chest. The strength left her, causing in her eyes gnarled tears. They were not tears, but ice flakes. Kathryn was quickly warming up, and her body was shivering from the cold. Anthony took off his jacket and carefully covered the she-wolf with it. His solution proved effective. Using the jacket as a drag, he was able to drag the she-wolf to shore on solid ground. Things were going much better, despite the violent shaking. Anthony got the she-wolf home and collapsed unconscious in the hay. That same evening, Kathryn's father had a high fever. His body turned inside out, and he alternately threw hot and cold. Kathryn's mother, Jessica, did not leave the spouse for a moment, trying to relieve his condition. But all proved futile. Even a paramedic who arrived from the neighborhood by noon the next day did not help. Bilateral pneumonia is not always cured in a hospital. In the village, with its spring thaw and other factors, the situation only worsened. No, the doctor fought for Anthony's life to the end. He even requested a helicopter to transport the patient to the region. But the old gypsy woman's prophecy had come true exactly as she had predicted. Anthony should have been afraid of water, and he was. But he couldn't cheat fate. The picture is forever etched in his memory. His mother's weeping eyes and his father's pale, almost waxen face. While Jessica was preparing for her husband's funeral, a she-wolf lying in a warm stable gave birth to 3 wolves at the last breath. Even the local veterinarian, Ethan, didn't believe that with such injuries the she-wolf would be able to produce offspring. I should shoot her so she doesn't suffer. I'm sorry, Jess. Euthanasia is the only thing I can suggest, but Kathryn's mother changed dramatically in her face, raising her crying eyes to the specialist. No, let her live and fight to the end. My Anthony laid down his life for her, so let her prove that it was not in vain. The vet only shook his head. What could he say? Of course, it's obvious to a hedgehog, but the she-wolf surprised everyone. She gave birth to 3 big babies. She chewed the umbilical cord and climbed in, but she wasn't strong enough for more. Died of heart failure, pulling her life out like a string in a last-ditch effort, despite 4 gunshot wounds in her body. Almost a verdict. You don't live long with that kind of thing. Seeing the gray babies shivering from the cold, Jessica wrapped them in a warm-down jacket and a scarf and thought, what am I going to do next? I've got to get ready for my husband's funeral. And then there's this worry. What if I put them on Kashtanka? Only one of her 4 pups survived, and she has plenty of milk. She's got a swollen udder. Maybe she won't chase them away. The babies are from a different tribe, from the free forest, Jessica thought, and went to the booth where the dog had made her nest, but not in the open air. She has babies to eat. And the box is warm, good. Anthony covered it with felt on both sides, made a roof from the remains of slate, a real home for immigrants. Jessica let Kashtanka sniff the wolves, watching carefully to see if the dog would be aggressive. But her fears were in vain. Maternal instinct at all times works wonders, and the dog could easily feed the cubs of his eternal enemies. And understandably, the cubs are gray or white, growl or yap. What's the difference? When the maternal soul is happy, squeak little mouths, and there is no greater reward for her than to give life to these tiny gray lumps with an exorbitant appetite. Since after the death of her husband, Jessica became seriously ill, Kathryn looked after the wolf cubs. Jessica was happy to meet her mistress, trying to lick her from head to toe. She was also proud to show her 3 foster mice, who kept to themselves. They collapsed amusingly, obeying their inner animal instinct. Many advised Jessica to get rid of the wolves, say, take them to the forest or leave them under the nearest bush. Nature itself will figure out what to do next, and to keep predators at home is dangerous, extremely ungrateful. Jessica hesitated for a moment, but Kathryn then managed to change the situation for the better. Mommy, let them live a little longer. They're just babies. I named them Warchick, Ethan, and Anthony. Can you imagine? They're just like dogs, only they don't wag their tails. Jessica smiled. Well, let them live a little longer. Their father laid down his life for them. It was the right thing to do, at least for the time being. Since then, the wolf cubs boldly began to live on the Maxwell's farm. Kashtanka, forgetting that the wolves are adopted, only marveled. Why are the pups so gray? The father was light-colored, but they were exactly the same color as the bride, light brown. Time passed without a trace. The lizards were growing fast and strong. However, it was not surprising. All 3 were males, the pride of their breed. But in the 2nd year, when the wolves grew up, they began to howl at night, so Kathryn had to let them go free. Go, my darlings, into the woods. Be smart and don't fall into traps, and also be afraid of people. Not everyone is as kind as my father. When the wolves felt free, they sniffed the air with their noses and rushed toward the nearest thicket. Kathryn was a little offended, as if she had caged them. But after running a few meters, the wolves turned around and gave their mistress a long farewell look. The most interesting thing was that the wolves did come. However, they tried to do it in the evening or at night. It is dangerous during the day, and poachers are not slumbering. They are just waiting for a portion of shot to be measured. And for some unknown reason, wolves came to the old cemetery. They don't keep caretakers in such places. It's scary. And who is there to watch over? Warchick grumbled. Ethan always sniffed at the grave of the late Anthony Maxwell and stared at the modest monument, erected with the money Jessica had saved. Whether they knew they were coming to see their savior or not, it was hard to say. They were wild animals, after all. You'd never know what was on their minds. The villagers repeatedly told Kathryn that they had seen wolves in the cemetery, but she didn't believe the rumors, and then she went to the city to try her hand in the metropolis. In truth, the girl's departure seemed more like a flight, and her mother had good reason to think so. Greg Morrow, the son of a local farmer, was to blame. When he saw a pretty girl, he immediately sent matchmakers to her mother. But Kathryn refused. Too fickle was Greg, and also too often allowed himself to get drunk, not the kind of groom she dreamed of. What can I say? Her late father, if he drank, he did it only on holidays, and then in moderation. And here he was so young and already an alcoholic. Politely refusing Greg, Kathryn thought that would be the end of the matter, but it wasn't. Farmer's son began to pursue her at every turn, literally. Goes Kathryn to the river. Greg will somehow go there. To the post office he follows. Greg is already waiting at the front door. When annoying courtship did not help, the farmer's son turned to threats. Don't let your happiness slip away. I've got 5 local beauties in my sights. You're working, you're looking, but you're still looking. Except for my farm, no one here will offer you anything good. And if you're more cooperative, I'll put you on a poultry farm. Or a milkmaid. You'll get a percentage of the milk yield. You'll have money. But if you keep resisting, you can forget about work. And not only for yourself, but for your mother as well. Kathryn's outrage took her breath away. Are you threatening me, Greg? But understand, I don't love you. You said it yourself, handsome as can be. Well, God help you. What's that got to do with me? Greg grinned wryly and shook his head. He walked away. Kathryn realized that from now on she would not live in the village. Greg Morrow was too vindictive. She remembered him from school. If he didn't like his teacher, he would put the button on the chair or wave the chalk behind his back. The principal would call his father, and Farmer Morrow would start throwing money at him. Here's money for repairs. Here's money for new curtains. I had to put up with Greg. What could he do when his father was king and god in the neighborhood? Jessica took the news of her daughter's departure calmly. After all, a man is an adult and makes his own choices. You just be careful, daughter. But in the city, everything is complicated. It's not like ours. I sewed a secret pocket in your coat to keep your money in. I've been saving a little from every paycheck for the wedding. It's all right. There'll be a holiday on your street, too. After the words of his mother, in the eyes of Kathryn glistened tears. After the death of his father, they almost did not talk to each other, and now again became so close as in her distant childhood. That evening, mother and daughter sat up late, talking about everything and remembering the past. And in the morning, Kathryn sat in the train and, breathing a farewell breath of fresh air, went to meet a new life in the big city. Megapolis met the guest from the province unkindly and reminded the alarmed swarm. Find a job was not as easy as Kathryn imagined. There are no positions available. We need female employees with experience. Where's your employment history? Was all she heard as she walked around the place. At one point, she even wanted to go waitressing in a restaurant, when by chance she met Mary Frederica, who worked as head nurse at the First City Hospital. By some elusive instinct, the kind-hearted woman immediately recognized in Kathryn a newcomer. And you must be looking for a job, sweetheart, so I'll help you. You do not worry. I work in surgery, and we just need nurses. You want to come? Or are you looking for something better? Kathryn looked at her new acquaintance gratefully and said quietly, I'm in. Really? You don't need a medical degree there, do you? Mary Frederica smiled. No, it doesn't. And if you need anything, I'll teach you everything you need to know, just for general knowledge. You know, everything will come in handy in life. So, thanks to the help of a concerned nurse, Kathryn became a nurse in the surgical department. There was a lot of work, even a lot. Nursing staff was constantly short, and Kathryn had to take care of 2, and sometimes 3 employees. Fortunately, Mary Frederica immediately took the new nurse under her wing and did not allow anyone to hurt or harass her. In parallel, a lonely nurse taught Kathryn the wisdom of her hard work. So just in case they teach her to give injections, to put a catheter or an IV, the other nurses only laughed. Why do I need these skills, Mary Frederica? I'm an orderly. What kind of duties could there possibly be? To keep Paul clean? Yes, the room is cleaned, and you want to make a generalist out of me, but Mary Frederica just shook her head and invariably told the story of her childhood when she couldn't help her friend who had swallowed water in the river. All because she didn't have the skills. Thank God, the girl was saved by a concerned bystander, and she survived. But the case itself is forever in Mary's memory, and for many years predetermined her choice of profession and fate. Therefore, teaching Kathryn the skills of first aid, Mary Frederica invariably repeated, You do not think that I just say so. Remember my other words? There are times in life when you have to act for sure and there is no time to think. God willing you don't have that happen. Kathryn listened to the head nurse and everything and didn't even think of resisting. The skill did prove useful, especially when working in a surgical ward. At one point, Mary Frederica had even considered talking to the superintendent and sending Kathryn to nursing school. What's wrong with that? Responsible female employees like that are always needed. Everyone knows that. And unfortunately, Mary Frederica's dreams were not destined to come true. And who would have thought that the culprit would be a young surgeon who, until recently, was listed as an intern in the Department of Surgery. About Stanley Ovchinnikov at that time knew only that he graduated from university only thanks to his father, who has a high position in the ministry, and so long ago would have been expelled for failure and systematic absenteeism. That's right. And when to study? When in the head only girls and partying until morning and pockets full of money. A foreign car, expensive, golden youth. Why did he go into medicine? Wondered Mary Frederica. Kathryn only sighed modestly, afraid to criticize such a prominent employee. Well, but Stanley always knew how to present himself, dressed with a needle, a straight and open look, expensive perfume, and a pleasant, slightly languid voice. Such qualities can easily open the door to almost any woman's soul, and all that would have been fine. But Stanley's priority was to get his way. Questions of romance, of sensual relations, were of no importance to him. Mary Frederica immediately sensed the threat emanating from this fatal handsome man. Such only for love dramas. A sea of tears are suitable, and in life from him no use. Or maybe he just hasn't found himself. Well, it happens. He grew up in a rich family with everything at hand. Now it's a different world, a different environment, Kathryn objected naively. But to lead the head nurse was not everyone could. He didn't find himself, you say? Yes, he has found himself, my dear, he has found himself. And all he cares about is money and his own amusement, Kathryn, of course, believed Mary Frederica, but still furtively glanced at Stanley, such a handsome man. What's a farmer's son like Greg Morrow? Oh, dreams. Just dreams. At first, Stanley didn't seem to notice Kathryn. Well, why should he be surprised? What was she to a young surgeon starting out? Just an orderly. Fetch, serve, and don't forget to mop the floor. Stanley and Kathryn probably wouldn't have gotten close under the right circumstances if it hadn't been for chance. And it all began when a nurse found a bank card belonging to Ovchinnikov on the floor. Like all good girls, Kathryn returned the find, which greatly pleased Stanley. Thank you so much. I was just looking for it. I wondered if my father had taken it from me. Kathryn lowered her eyes in embarrassment. You're welcome. I didn't do anything special. Carefulness is a specialty in this business. Stanley smiled enigmatically. Then suddenly, out of the blue, he said, Listen, Kathryn, what if I offered to take you to the movies as a thank you for your help? Although if you don't want to go to the movies, you can go to a restaurant or a cafe. You don't worry about the cost. I'll take care of everything, any outfit you want. Kathryn's cheeks are flushed. While Ovchinnikov himself asks her out on a date. But how can you refuse? In the memory immediately recalled the words of Mary Frederica, warning of the possible consequences. But Kathryn immediately discarded them, mentally giving herself an attitude. All right, I'll go once. But what's wrong with the new movie? We'll see it. It doesn't mean anything, of course. It's always easy to fool yourself if you want to, especially when you really want to. In this case, Kathryn deliberately chose a movie theater because she was very afraid of all these newfangled restaurants with their abundance of unfamiliar dishes and all sorts of given rules. The first date went as smoothly as it could. Stanley was polite, modest, and cautious. No free hot hugs or kisses. Kathryn even felt as if she'd come to meet a fellow nerd. If only she had known that the cunning spider named Stanley had already begun to weave his web, from which the beautiful, naive butterflies were no longer destined to escape. Mary Frederica tried again to warn Kathryn of the danger, but how could she? She was literally enchanted by Stanley, his voice, his look, the scope of his courtship. Kathryn began to think herself exceptional, that she could overcome the barrier of internal prejudices and find love. How many gullible girls around the world every year fall for this fishing line? Kathryn was no exception, believing in the sincerity of the feelings of Major Stanley. Of course, it was a mistaken delusion, but so pleasant, exciting, that even dizzy. Dates and romantic encounters followed one after another, sucking young people deeper and deeper into the abyss of passion. It's hard to say whether Stanley was in love at a certain stage of the relationship or not. Perhaps some kind of crush was still there, but the heat of feelings clearly pumped up, giving way to practicality and common sense. The news of Kathryn's pregnancy affected the lovers with the effect of a cold shower, and it was Stanley who was the first to show his concern. Oh boy, what bad timing. I just got a job at the department, starting to build a career. And now there's such a burden on my shoulders. Kathryn looked at him with surprise. Stanley, but I'm the one having the baby. How can my pregnancy and childbirth interfere with you? Especially since we've already talked about it. It's no big deal. We'll get a place to live when we're done. Stanley's face contorted into an irritated grimace. Just like you say. Did you know we did all this romance on Daddy's dime? Rose petals, custom-made bouquets at expensive hotels. I don't know what you're getting at. What's my point? My point is that if my dad finds out you're pregnant and getting married soon, he'll cut off all my accounts and I'll be a pauper. And you with a beggar's wife, who will darn my old socks and feed me macaroni in the evenings. He shrieked. Tears rolled down Kathryn's cheeks. "What do you suggest? What's the solution?" "I don't understand." Stanley frowned. "The only suggestion I have is to abort while the term is early. I'll give you the money. Don't worry about it. I'll arrange for the best clinic, no waiting list." Kathryn looked into his eyes and saw in them the same consumerist attitude to life, about which she so many times told Mary Frederica. "Mary Frederica, I will not go for it. You remember that? Do you hear me? Your father can't even count on it. I won't ask for child support. And I'm going to give the baby my last name." A shadow of anxiety slid across Stanley's face. In fact, he had not even allowed such a development. He had hoped that Kathryn would give up immediately after his proposal. But this redneck was much stronger than Stanley thought. All right, just take it easy. Think it through. And then you can explain your decision. But I'll decide what to do next. Don't worry about it. I'm not against having a baby. I just wanted to see your reaction. But now you've seen it. So think about it, Stanley. Do you want us with the baby or not? Kathryn said goodbye. Stanley gave her a glance, then hissed. Well, we'll see whose will take it. The next day, Kathryn began to have problems. First, her advocate Mary Frederica was transferred to another department, and then she was retired. All this happened so quickly that Kathryn did not have time to remember. The new head nurse disliked the young nurse at first sight. It's not surprising, because the head of the department gave the order, and he directly Stanley's father, who did not like the story told by his son. "You'll bend this nurse into a ram's horn for me. Fill her with work up to her eyeballs, just so she would forget to think about the child and grab a good job," Ovchinnikov shouted into the phone. The head superintendent frantically ran to execute the order. Deep down, he liked Kathryn as an employee, quiet, hard-working, reliable. But when the case involves a higher authority, it is no longer to personal ambition. Sam, they say, would survive, to hold on to the chair with both hands. The head of the department, although not God knows what, but still a position, and not bad, by the way. And Kathryn continued to work by virtue of her naivety, not realizing what was going on around her. Seeing that the girl did not understand the hint, Ovchinnikov Sr. increased the pressure, from which the nurse literally fell off her feet from fatigue. Stanley only laughed and patiently waited for Kathryn to backtrack. They say she realized the mistake. "Please help me in my difficult May." But Kathryn persisted. So Stanley decided to go the other way and talk to her mother. To do this, under an anonymous pretext, he suggested to Kathryn to go to the village with him by car. Probably will propose. Ah, what a romantic, thought Kathryn naively. Stanley hatched a completely different plan, more cruel and heartless. Picked up on Saturday Kathryn from home, he put on a mask of cordiality and pleasing and drove to the highway. On the road, the young people chatted about all sorts of trifles, trying to pass the time on the road. And if Kathryn communicated with her fiancé sincerely, Stanley talked through force, mentally begging that all this is over soon. On either side of the road grew spruces, pines, cedars, practically covering the sky. Suddenly the conversation was going in a very different direction than Stanley had intended. This was the fault of Kathryn, whose curiosity had once again played tricks on her. She thought Stanley wanted to talk to her mother about the wedding, but that's not what happened. "No," Kathryn, the young surgeon, grinned. "We're only going to your mother for one purpose, so that she can tell you the right thing to do." Kathryn's cheeks flushed, her lips trembled treacherously. It was about 50 kilometers to the turnoff to the highway leading to the village when she asked the car to stop. "What, right here in the middle of nowhere?" Stanley asked. "Are you out of your mind?" he blustered and pressed the brake pedal. The car jerked sharply and stopped like a stumbling block. Kathryn didn't care anymore. Trying not to hear Stanley's insults, she opened the door and stepped out into the driveway. "Shut the door at least." "Where are you going, you idiot? Are you going to walk to your village or something?" Stanley said wryly. Kathryn took a couple more steps and, holding her stomach, collapsed on the roadside strewn with last year's leaves. "Well, stop the comedy. I know your tricks. You just want to make a scene. I'm pregnant, and you're all going to carry me in your arms." "What?" "And what else?" Stanley grumbled unhappily. But Kathryn was really sick. Really bad. The pain in her lower abdomen was tearing her up, making her bend over. It was impossible to convince Stanley of that. Getting out of the car, he tried to lift Kathryn off the ground, causing her more pain. "All right, enough showing off. Let's go," Stanley said. "Please, leave me alone," Kathryn whispered through tears. Stanley was about to make another joke when a muffled growl sounded nearby. The boy flinched and looked around involuntarily. But there was no one near him but Kathryn. The growl was repeated again. And now Stanley realized that it was coming from the nearest bushes. He involuntarily backed toward the car as 3 adult wolves came out of the woods. One of them had a grayish-blue streak down his withers, indicating his advanced age among forest predators. Growling menacingly, the wolves came closer, causing Stanley to scramble toward the car and screech to a halt. All he could think about at that moment was how to get away from such a dangerous place. He didn't care about Kathryn. This was the true cost of a relationship, a lie and nothing more. The wolves approached Kathryn, who was lying on the roadside, and began to lick her face and hands. She looked up in surprise and couldn't believe her eyes. "I'm going to disappoint you, you brave little rascal." "Is it really you?" Kathryn asked. The wolves stepped back a little, listening to such an outlandish human speech. Of course, Kathryn could not say for sure whether the wolves she had rescued were wolves or not. Perhaps it was just an ordinary coincidence. But on the other hand, why then had they not attacked her and shown friendliness? Kathryn read the answer in the eyes of the wolves, who looked at her with respect, as if she were a member of their pack. Soon the sound of an approaching car engine was heard, and the predators became visibly agitated and slowly paid. More often. A wave of pain in her lower abdomen made Kathryn wince again and fall into sticky oblivion. Fortunately, a passing motorist noticed the woman lying on the side of the road and called an ambulance to help the victim as soon as possible. He carried Kathryn into the passenger compartment of the vehicle and drove towards the paramedics. Despite the timely assistance and efforts of the doctors, they were unable to save Kathryn's pregnancy. Stanley was not directly to blame, and no one would have even had the desire to accuse him of it. Kathryn spent about 2 weeks in the hospital, during which time the head of the surgical department dismissed her retroactively. Everything went smoothly. Nothing to take issue with. But Kathryn didn't care anymore. In her mind, she cut Stanley out of her life forever. And when he showed up at her discharge with flowers and an envelope with money in his hands, the former nurse refused to accept the bouquet and threw the money in the trash. From now on, she could only count on herself. Since the work in the surgical department could be forgotten, Kathryn had to go through a lot before she could find the strength to live on. Bitter tears of anguish and tantrums, the endless questions of why kept her on her toes, slowly sinking into an abyss of longing and despair. It was only through the help and care of Mary Frederica that she was able to distract herself and turn her attention to finding a new job. So, with the light hand of the former nurse, she became a cleaner in the trading firm Hermes. The work was hard, but no more so than in the surgical department, where shortly before her dastardly dismissal, she had been working for 3. "It's okay, I'll manage. I'm strong, I can do everything, I'll get through it all," Kathryn insinuated herself, trying to be callous and indifferent to other people's misfortune in a state of anxious reflection. She was brought out by loud shouts from the front of the cabin. "Stop the bus. There's a man in bad shape here. Somebody call an ambulance right away," she heard, and a sense of relief came over her. Kathryn opened her eyes and saw the crowd parting. Standing in the aisle next to an elderly man was a female controller with a frightened face and eyes full of fear. Kathryn realized that she didn't know what to do next, but she needed to act immediately. She left her seat and made her way to the lifeless body of the passenger. He probably had a heart problem, and Kathryn understood that as well as anyone. She wasn't a doctor, of course, nor was she a nurse or a paramedic. She just remembered Mary Frederica's insistent advice to her to practice a particular skill to the point of automaticity. So Kathryn knew how to give injections of all kinds, could put IVs, measure blood pressure, and also knew how to conduct indirect cardiac massage, the principle of which she remembered to automatism. Asking the driver to pull over, she unbuttoned the man's shirt and got to work. As she made rhythmic movements, trying to ignite a spark of life in the stranger's body. Her confidence in the success of this idea was getting weaker by the second, but it was too late to stop now. "Come on, don't go away," honey, Kathryn murmured through her tears. Those who watched from the side, in horror, covered their faces with their hands without stopping to whisper words of prayer. Finally, the man's eyelids fluttered open, and he began to cough hoarsely. But the main thing was that he was breathing again, albeit intermittently, but breathing. For Kathryn, it was like a personal victory. So many times she had practiced this skill on a special mannequin, without listening to Mary Frederica's comments. And now was the decisive moment for her. Then it was not in vain. "Where am I? What happened to me?" the man whispered. Kathryn could not answer, as she had become wound up in anticipation. Stress caused by the sight of death, which this time missed and bypassed the interior of the bus. 5 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. The medics, who expressed their gratitude to Kathryn, who didn't even have a medical degree, immediately took the victim away, and she didn't have time to talk to the rescued man and get his name. Because of all these events, the bus spent an extra 20 minutes on the road, from which a terrible scandal awaited the young employee in the office. The first to attack her was the head of the sales department, Angelina Victoria Jesus Maxwell. "Did you even look at the clock? Or don't you care about anyone? This is what you call getting here faster? You're kidding me." "Angelina Victoria, but it's not my fault," Kathryn objected. "A man got sick on the bus." The supervisor waved her hand dismissively. "What bus? Tell me, for goodness sake. If you don't have your own transportation, take a cab and you won't have a problem." Kathryn's shoulders shook with restrained sobs. At that moment, the office door swung open and Andrew Clive, the firm's director, appeared on the threshold. He looked around at his subordinates and immediately noticed the crying face of Kathryn, who was desperately trying to look normal and wiping her eyes with a handkerchief every now and then. "What's going on here? Why is there such a commotion and Maxwell is all in tears?" the businessman asked. Everyone present fell silent. Their gazes turned to the head of the department. They said, "She made a mess of it. Now you have to clean it up before the boss punishes everyone." Looking at the stunned boss, Andrew repeated his question more gently. Angelina pressed her lips together resentfully, but replied, "It's simple. Maxwell was almost 40 minutes late for work." 20, Kathryn corrected. "Who cares if it's half a minute late, you know?" Angelina snapped. Andrew was not interested in watching the squabble between the employee and the department head. The young businessman needed not so much a reason as an explanation. But what is Kathryn's explanation? Maybe something respectable happened. You can't accuse a person of being irresponsible for no reason. Angelina glanced irritably at Kathryn and hissed angrily. Yes, she was on the bus rescuing someone. Some man fainted, and our Mother Teresa gave him CPR. We know those stories. You don't need to believe other people's nonsense. After the words of the department head, Andrew's face changed dramatically. "What man? Can you elaborate?" Angelina met his gaze, after which she said, "What man, Andrew? It's just an elderly man who collapsed. He had a heart attack, so I gave him an indirect massage." Andrew raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Do you have a medical degree?" "Kathryn." The cleaning lady lowered her eyes in embarrassment. "No, I used to be a nurse." "That's what I learned, a nurse. Thanks to her teaching." Andrew looked around at everyone present and met the eyes of the head of the department. "So, Angelina Victoria, we are canceling Kathryn's reprimand today, as her tardiness was no accident. The fact is that Kathryn saved the father of my late companion Boris Eugene Windrow. Dennis Windrow, co-founder of our concern, was killed in an accident 6 months ago. But you all remember that, of course. You don't know his father Boris Gary Windrow very well. He's the one Kathryn saved on the bus today. I was just told about 15 minutes ago myself." The director's words made a truly lasting impression on the staff. A lot of people looked at Kathryn with a different set of eyes. It turns out that there are real heroes among them, capable of saving lives. That's how you live, and do not know that side by side with you works a girl who can do real miracles. And on a personal note, I'm going to give you a bonus, Kathryn. You deserve it, Andrew said in your voice. and the office was filled with a roar of applause. Only Angelina didn't clap along with everyone else, glaring angrily at the cleaning lady. When the applause finally died down and the staff scattered around the office again, Kathryn went to the back room to finally change her clothes and go about her usual duties. She saw nothing special in rescuing an elderly passenger. I didn't give him all that time for nothing. If I had saved a child, I don't know. That would be a different matter, she thought. The shift flew by at the ferry of cleanliness unnoticeably. She washed the floors, wiped the windowsills, watered the flowers, then went outside and tidied up the steps. Had a few words with the janitor, and the day is over. But 10 minutes before the end of her shift, the director called her in. Well, what else? Did he change his mind? Will he start scolding? Kathryn thought wistfully. But Andrew kindly offered her a chair and asked the secretary to prepare coffee. Then, after waiting for Kathryn to come to his senses and drink about half a cup, went to the main thing. Kathryn, will you pardon me for not using your middle name? It's easier for me. You see, I have, what's the right way to put it? A business proposition. On the face of Kathryn reflected sincere amazement. An offer? But how can I help you? I'm already on your staff. Andrew got up from his desk and walked around the office, trying to understand the inexplicable inner turmoil. Finally, pulling himself together, he continued. Kathryn, I'll be very honest with you. The offer does not even come from me. Boris Gary Windrow, the man you rescued, you see, he wants you to be his nurse. A nurse? I don't have the training and the responsibility of taking on such a... Andrew frowned. I appreciate your opinion, Kathryn, but I dare say that Boris Gary Windrow, the father of my late friend, we started together, came up from the bottom. Only Dennis died 6 months ago in a car accident. Maybe you heard about it on the Beltway. Head-on collision. Ridiculous death. Still hurts my heart. Dennis' wife is a widow. Boris Gary Windrow is ill. Often says that he cannot without medical help, you know. Kathryn sighed sadly. Yes, I understand, of course. How could I not? But what's that got to do with it? You can hire a qualified caregiver. There are many special recruitment agencies nowadays. Boris Gary said you were the only one he could trust. He's a good judge of character. Let me tell you, 40 years in the teaching profession. Does that mean something? Andrew persisted. Kathryn thought. On the one hand, she had always dreamed of trying to try herself in the world of medicine, but on the other hand, remembered well what ended her previous attempt. But to refuse Andrew William for some reason did not want to. There was something in his eyes, something good, kind, and real. No falseness, no playing on two fronts, he said it as it was, straight to the forehead. And how else to earn the trust of the interlocutor? Kathryn squeezed her lip painfully and looked into the eyes of the director. And what will happen then? Andrew William? But when a month passes, or how long does it take? What about my job? Andrew appreciated the boldness of the question and answered very honestly. For the period of part-time work, Kathryn's workplace at our firm will remain with you. And when you return, you can work as before. Consider it my bonus for you. Boris Gary also intends to pay you a salary, as I remember. Kathryn smiled involuntarily. And not because Andrew started talking about money, but because he said everything on the merits, honestly and frankly. Weighing the pros and cons, she agreed. The next morning, Kathryn stood at the door of the mansion of the late Dennis Windrow. She was greeted by an unpleasant girl in a lace robe and was seen and with a touch of understanding on her face, typical of those who are crazy about wine, fires, and songs. What are you, the new nurse? She mumbled, glancing at her guest incredulously. Kathryn nodded affirmatively. Why are you so early? It's only 8 o'clock. Normal people are still asleep and dreaming rainbow dreams, she said hurriedly. That old man be damned was sitting there canceling as if they could help him. Doctors say a month left, but if the operation is not done. After letting Kathryn through, the girl started complaining. As it turned out later, it was Boris Gary's sister-in-law, Albina. Not the least bit embarrassed by the presence of a person she didn't know, she ranted aloud. Auntie, don't count on a permanent job here. This old man will drive anyone crazy. One thing he likes, then another, then, you see, the candidate does not know the poets of the Silver Age, then did not read modern prose writers, accustomed to his school children and the head of his children. But with me such tricks will not pass. Kathryn shrugged uncertainly, realizing that the least she wants to discuss the sick man in whose house she came to work as a nurse. Your silence is sly. Do you want to stay? Well, am I yours? There's been a lot of you in the last 6 months, one or the other. Well, how will he see? Come to my place. I'll buy you a martini or something stronger, cognac or whiskey, which I don't spare. Otherwise, this old man will not be tolerated at any price. Albina went resentfully to her room. Kathryn had to act on her own intuition. She found Boris Gary's room only from the 3rd time, after going through several doors. Seeing her on the doorstep, the man visibly perked up and even tried to raise himself up in bed. I've been waiting for you, felt in my heart that you'd say yes. Believe me, I saw you in my dreams before that incident on the bus, he said. My grandmother on my mom's side was a fortune teller, so a little of it was passed on to me. Kathryn smiled and said her name. Boris Gary was over the moon. I was on my way to the cemetery to see my son, thinking about painting the fence, weeding the grass. It's been 6 months. It's too early to put a monument. The earth has to settle. But you see, I didn't make it to the cemetery. I got a heart attack. Maybe from the heat. Maybe the excitement gave you a fever, Grandpa. Kathryn looked at the patient reproachfully. You need to take care. Boris Gary, you're no longer a boy to risk your health, and I can go to the cemetery myself, if you like. It's no trouble to me. Kathryn, don't make this your problem. Don't put other people's worries on your young shoulders. Denise was a good boy. Don't think. He and Andrew were in the same class. They were friends. I raised my son alone. My wife, God rest her soul, died a year after he was born. She was in poor health. She couldn't get pregnant for a long time, and then a miracle happened. You can't call it anything else. Kathryn looked with undisguised tenderness at this frail old man, in whose eyes there was so much worldly wisdom that her heart shrank with sadness at the sight of such a warm welcome. Kathryn realized that Boris Gary had long lacked simple human companionship. No wonder with such a daughter-in-law ignoring him. She's furious that Danis signed everything over to me shortly before he died, as if he had a premonition that I was the only one who would stay out of the business. Andrew Clive I trust, he's my think tank, and the exec was a firm friend of my son's every day. Andrew almost went to jail. He was young, hot, but he stood his ground and stayed free. He didn't serve much in the army, but he was smart. How did he look in the water? You can see what a noble businessman he turned out to be, the man added. Kathryn nodded in agreement. To tell the truth, she liked Andrew Clive at first sight. A real man and a man of his word, not like that slippery Stanley. From then on, Kathryn began to work as a nurse. Albina tried to get her on her side at first, but then gave up, thinking that Kathryn was as crazy as her father-in-law. But Kathryn worked, not interfering where her opinion was not asked. She could not sit idle with a sick person, and in her spare time cleaned the house, washed dishes, and even tidied up overgrown weeds in the flower beds. Here she is, a real housewife, a closet, not like Albina or the lazy one. I'll have to give Andrew a hint, get him to pay attention. He's having bad luck with one or the other, and he has to give each one a piece of his business pie. Young and green, Boris whispered to Gary and grimaced with pain. He touched the left side of his chest with the palm of his hand. All this Kathryn did not know, and simply worked in the late businessman's house for the common good. One morning, rushing to work, she saw a small puppy, who hid behind the trash cans out of fear, and quietly whimpered while people indifferently passed by, with each passing minute losing trust in the eyes of the little creature. Wow, what a little guy. How did you end up here? Kathryn said with a smile. Let me take you with me. It's a big house. I hope they won't chase you away. Is it necessary to say how happy Boris Gary was when he saw a small fluffy gift behind the nurse's back? Oh my God, what a miracle. It's just unbelievable. It's so round, it's so cute. A little bear. That'll be your nickname, Bear. Now I'll feed you and give you some milk. You do not look that I'm a pensioner in a t-shirt, but I know the trick. With a smile, looking at the joyful old man, Kathryn felt an inexplicable burst of energy. Perhaps this is the best gratitude for her work, when the patient feels good and you feel good. Deciding to go to the kitchen to cook something delicious, Kathryn had already pulled the doorknob when involuntarily heard someone's voices. One of them was male, obviously familiar to her earlier, but the female undoubtedly belonged to Boris Gary's sister-in-law Albina. But how could it be? I'm already tired of waiting and drinking cognac to the morgue attendants, said the male voice. What a bunch of cowards. They want to take money for one thing, Albina said grumpily. But you, Stanley, are not much of a helper. Is it easy for you to reason on the spot? You're a surgeon, a medical worker. But what would it take for you to make friends with the paramedics and commit a body to the ground without an autopsy? I'm risking my head here. You see, that old man is a devil. He's sick, but he notices everything. Even when I drugged Dennis, I was less afraid, but it was more serious than that. You know, he fell asleep at the wheel and almost went to the zone. Albina interrupted. Albina's interlocutor backed down. Okay, don't get hysterical. Be careful, don't be nervous. He'll go away soon. The heart is not iron, and all of us with you will leave. He tried to calm her down. Kathryn literally took a breath from all heard. What are they talking about? And the voice. She definitely heard it before. Wait, Stanley's a surgeon. Oh my God, that's her ex-fiancé. Kathryn immediately felt like opening the kitchen door, since she had already realized that Albina and her lover were talking on a video link. What a creep, and Stanley's good too. See where he's gone. He wants to take a rich widow for a spin. I guess his parents' money isn't enough, Kathryn thought. Her first thought was to tell Boris Gary everything as it was, but seeing how he calmly fiddling with little Michael, Kathryn abandoned this idea. What's the good news? Grandfather will become ill. And what then? Resuscitate him again? No, that's not an option. You don't put a bullet in the same funnel twice. Everyone knows that. So Kathryn took the desperate step of telling Andrew in person. What's the big deal? He is, after all, without 5 minutes nephew of the grandfather. So let him help in any way he can. Having appointed a meeting in a cafe, Kathryn began to look forward to the evening. But as it turned out, the coming day presented the nurse with another shocking news which Kathryn told her. None other than the family notary, Victor Stevenson. After spending about an hour in Boris Gary's room, he left with a look of intense concern on his face. At first the notary, as if nothing had happened, walked past Kathryn, then turned around, came close and shook her hand. Congratulations, Kathryn. My client made a will in your favor. What client? Kathryn didn't understand. Boris Gary, who else? Upon his death, you will become sole owner of all financial assets. However, with one reservation, Andrew Clive will be your trustee and consultant in case of separation of the business, the notary patiently explained. Why do I need these honors? I'm not a relative, I'm just an outsider, Kathryn objected. But Victor Stevenson had already bowed and, wishing her a good day, hurried to the exit. Kathryn's head was literally spinning from the abundance of information, wills, inheritance, poisoning ex-fiancé. God, why should she do all this? Is not it possible to live a quiet, unnoticeable life of an ordinary cleaner? So thought Kathryn, rushing to meet Andrew to her great relief. The businessman took the information calmly, making a few notes in his notebook. Then he thought intensely for about 10 minutes, after which he said, "But now a lot of things make sense to me, and I was wondering how Danis could fall asleep at the wheel. But Albina, she's a snake. And there's a lot of crime here. His father disowned him, so he turned to crime. They treat various gangsters at home for a small fee. Well, it's time to get the authorities involved. I don't worry about the inheritance. Boris Gary already called me and explained everything during the month you worked for him. It's like he's reborn. He's got a new lease on life, you know. So he decided to take a risk and go ahead with the surgery. If things went badly, he insured himself with a will. Albina wouldn't get a penny if he died. Boris Gary has long suspected her of lying, especially after she could not get pregnant for 3 years from Dennis, and then in her room contraceptives were found. So Albina is a fraud. Kathryn listened to Andrew and did not believe. Maybe all this is a dream. It was enough to pinch herself by the hand as everything disappeared into the harsh reality, like a cloud of vapor. But she decided to bide her time and rely on Andrew's wits. Looking ahead, it's safe to say he didn't let her down. Private investigators have collected on Albina so much dirt that she was promised 30 years in prison. Boris Gary kept his word, and in the treatment went to the end, agreeing to conduct heart surgery. Throughout the course of treatment, Andrew and Kathryn did not leave him a step away from him. Thanks to modern techniques and the talent of American doctors, the operation was successful, and now the doctors were promising Boris Gary a long life. "No, dear, I do not need long. I just need to wait for grandchildren. And you can go to God with feeling," said Grandpa. He looked conspiratorially at Andrew and Kathryn, who had become his nearest and dearest people. At their feet was spinning Michael, and in the room sounded the ringing laughter of the nurse and the businessman, who decided to link their lives together. After all they had been through together, Boris Gary smiled back. After all, he knew that from now on in their lives, everything would be completely different.
Study, Louisa. With an education, you can't go anywhere, and I'll help you in any way I can, said Brianna to her daughter while she was studying at school. Louisa grew up an obedient, kind, hard-working girl. She never knew her father. She was raised by her mother and grandmother. Brianna tried hard to make sure that her daughter did not need anything and did not feel inferior to her friends. She worked all day long and only spent time with her daughter on the rare weekends she had. One day, when Louise was in 8th grade, she overheard a conversation between her mother and grandmother. How could he do that? Brianna almost cried. I trusted him, and he... What am I supposed to do now? What's the use of crying after the time? Answered Victoria. It's God's will. If it happened, then so be it. I'd like to raise Louise. Her mother wailed. And then there's this. The woman kept interrupting her phrases, so the girl could not understand what her grandmother and mother were saying. Suddenly, Brianna asked, Will you stay a couple of days with Louise while I'm in the hospital? Don't you dare, I forbid you. Victoria was indignant. These are not toys. You should have thought about it before. Now don't anger God. We'll raise it. We raised Louise and we'll raise another child. Louise dropped the textbook she was holding in her hands in surprise. Her mother came running at the sound. What's wrong? How long have you been standing there? She asked. Mom, are you going to have a baby? Ignoring her mother's question, the girl asked. No, you misunderstood everything. The woman began to twist. I need to go away for a while, and I asked Grandma to look after you. Why are you lying to me? The daughter asked. I clearly heard Grandma say that we would raise another child. Her daughter's words confused her. She flapped her eyelashes and remained silent. Victoria still did not interfere in their conversation, but seeing her daughter's confusion, she said, Louise, you are an adult and have a right to know. It just so happens that you will soon have a little sister or brother. Mom, Brianna tried to stop her. Louisa, don't listen to her. Grandma's got it all wrong. Louise hugged her mother and whispered, I dreamed so much about having a sister. I pray for it every night, and God has heard my prayers. I will help you with everything, but don't take away my dream. Together we can do it. Brianna was moved by her daughter's words. She pressed the girl against her and cried. Seeing this picture, Victoria exhaled with relief and said, Well, thank God, I've got it all figured out. At the due date, Brianna gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl and named her Martha. Louise, as promised, never left her sister's side. And when she was at school, Victoria took care of the baby girl. Brianna had to leave maternity leave after 3 months to keep her job. Martha's father never showed up at their house or showed any interest in their daughter, so the baby's birth certificate, like Louise's, had a dash on it. Victoria loved her granddaughters. She was very worried about them and feared that they would repeat their mother's fate. She often stroked their heads and sighed, saying, My orphans. Louise did not understand why her grandmother called them that, because they had a mother and grandmother who loved them. But Victoria's words became prophetic. When Louise was finishing 11th grade, Victoria suddenly fell ill. The doctors couldn't make an accurate diagnosis, so they treated one thing or another. But the medicines didn't help. Every day she was getting worse and worse. Just recently, a woman full of strength was dying in front of her family. On the day when Louisa received her high school diploma, Victoria passed away. Louise wanted to go to work to help her mother raise her younger sister, but Brianna insisted that the girl continue to study. Louise entered the institute without much difficulty. Now she had less time for her sister, but she still helped her mother whenever possible. Martha grew up a bright, inquisitive, and very mobile girl. She was always happy when her sister returned from the institute and followed her around all evening. She could sit next to Olga for hours and watch her comprehend the sciences. When Martha was 5 years old and Louise was in her 3rd year at the institute, Brianna suddenly fell ill. Thinking that it was just a cold, the woman did not pay attention to it and continued to go to work. But every day she got worse and worse. When she got to the hospital, it was too late. She was diagnosed with a terrible disease that was incurable. Brianna burned out like a candle in 6 months. After burying her mother, Louise, who had just entered her 4th year of college, was left with a little sister in her arms. From the inheritance, they had only a 2-room apartment on the outskirts of the city in which they lived. Having learned about the situation in the family, the guardianship and custody authorities immediately came to visit. Despite her older sister's resistance, Marta was taken to the orphanage with the words, "You are not able to support the child. You have no permanent income except for a scholarship, but that is not enough. Get a job and then come to us." For several days, Louise went door to door looking for work, and luck smiled on her. She found a job as a housekeeper in a wealthy house. The owner, a woman in her 50s, was looking for a housekeeper, but she needed references. After talking to Louise and finding out all the circumstances that had brought her to her, she took a liking to the girl and took her on probation. "If you're right for me, I won't hurt your salary and I'll help you get your sister back," Donna promised. Louise tried hard to please her employer, and after a few weeks she managed to get Martha out of the orphanage. She was happy, even though it was not easy for her now. Early in the morning, Louise took her sister to daycare and drove to the other side of the city, where she had to take care of the housework. Good thing, even in the lifetime of her mother and grandmother, the girl learned to manage the household. From work, she ran to the institute. In the evening, Louise would go to the kindergarten to pick up Marta, and the sisters would return home together. Marta, though she was still very young, often noticed the tiredness on her sister's face. At such times, she would sit down beside her, put her arm around her, and like an adult say, "It's hard for you, Louisa, but don't be sad. I'll grow up soon and I'll help you with everything. The main thing is that we're together. Just don't leave me." Louise hugged Marta motherly and replied with a smile, "We will definitely manage everything." Louise was pleased that she had found a job and was able to bring her sister home. Over time, she became attached to her employer. The relationship between the owner and the housekeeper was warm, even friendly. The girl was surprised by only one thing. Why does a nice in every way, kind in every way, smart, intelligent, wealthy woman lives alone? She did not dare to ask directly, and Donna did not tell anything about herself. One day, while cleaning, Louise came across a photo album and couldn't resist her curiosity. One page after another, she looked at the pictures of young Donna. Some of them showed her posing alone, some had her friends by her side. Only one picture showed Donna with a handsome young man. It looked very happy. Engrossed in the photo, Louisa did not notice how the landlady entered the room. When she saw the photo album in her hands, she said, "All my memories are in it. Friends, colleagues, just acquaintances. And who is this?" Louise asked cautiously, pointing to the picture of a young man. "You're both so happy here." Donna sat down next to her, took the photo in her hands, looked at the smiling faces for a few minutes in silence, as if remembering the events in which it was taken, and then spoke. "You're right. We are very happy here indeed," she said. "This is Jack, my fiancé. We are 30 years old in this photo. We loved each other. I thought we're going to get married, making plans for the future. And then it was over in an instant." Donna was silent. Louisa felt that it was difficult for her mistress to remember the events of distant years and even more difficult to talk about them. The girl put her arm around Donna and rested her head on her shoulder. The woman smiled, though there was a deep sadness in her eyes. Is he dead? Louise tried to pull her mistress out of her memories. Who? Donna woke up, Jack? No, he's fine, I guess. After a little more silence, the woman pulled herself together and continued. A week before the wedding, I found out he was seeing someone else. What do you mean? Louise was surprised. Why get married if you love someone else? Donna smiled and looked at the housekeeper with a slight squint of her eyes. You're still young. You don't understand a lot of things. You trust people, and they often take advantage of our kindness and gullibility. By my 30s, I had already achieved a lot in life. I had my own business, which developed and brought a good income. I lived in a spacious apartment and planned to buy a house. I could already afford to go on vacation twice a year. Sergei liked all this. You bet. The girl couldn't help her emotions. He was happy to go on vacation with me, Donna continued, not paying attention to the exclamation of the housekeeper. He made plans for our future together every day. He already had a design in his head for the house we were to live in, us and our children. He dreamed of me having a child with him, or better yet, 2 or 3. He had it all figured out. By his own admission, he wanted to marry me, put me on maternity leave, and take my place in my business. He gradually transferred the money into his accounts and then, would fly away to his dove, who for the sake of enrichment was willing to endure all this, waiting for him. What a horror. Louise was genuinely amazed. And where did you meet him? 3 years before the events I described, he came to work at my company. His good education and experience spoke in his favor. Jack was a quick learner, quick to grasp things. His determination, diligence, and persistence were amazing. At first, he caught my attention as an employee. There aren't many like him. Gradually, our communication turned into a friendly one, and 2 years later, he made me an offer. I knew him only from a positive side, so I immediately agreed. Before him, I had many admirers, but in all of them I found some flaw. Jack seemed perfect to me. It's true what they say. Love is blind. When you found out about the affair, did you break up with him? Yes, I kicked him out the same day. After Sergei, no one could win your heart, Louise asked. I was already pregnant when I broke up with him, Donna admitted. I found out that day and rushed home to make my fiancé happy. But the surprise didn't work. He brought his mistress to my apartment. The woman was still surprised by her fiancé's insolence. A banal story. But it always seems to happen only in the movies or somewhere far away. But not to you. Donna summed up her story. And the baby? Louise asked. Was it born? Yes, of course it was. I had a healthy, beautiful boy at the due date, and I named him Austin. Where is he now? He's on an internship in America. He should be back soon. I admire you, Donna. Louise said with emotion. You're so strong. You made your own business. You raised your son alone, gave him a good education. Yes, I did everything for him, the woman confirmed. I felt guilty that I had deprived him of communication with his father. So I tried to fill the gap in every way I could. If clothes, shoes, then the best, branded, vacation only abroad, education European. In short, I worked day and night to provide my boy with the best. He must love you very much and appreciate everything you do for him. Louise's question remained unanswered. Donna abruptly changed the subject, remembering that she had a business appointment. Louise and her sister spent the whole weekend at Donna's house. At her mistress' request, she cleaned the rooms several times, especially the one for the young master. Finally, exhausted, the housekeeper said, Donna, the whole house is already shining. Don't you think you've done enough cleaning? After a second look in all the most secret corners, she agreed. All right, it looks clean, she said, and then added, Austin doesn't like the house to be dusty or cluttered. Early the next week, the mother was looking forward to her son's arrival. You don't have to come tomorrow, she told Louise the day before. Austin and I will need some alone time. It's been so long since we've seen each other. The housekeeper nodded and said goodbye. The next day after school, Louise hurried to the daycare center to pick up her sister early. The weather was overcast. It had been raining since the morning. In the afternoon, the rain stopped, but the humidity and strong wind were pervasive. Louise was standing at the bus stop waiting for the bus when a car stopped nearby. A young man got out of the car and, ignoring the people around him, headed toward the flower store behind the bus stop. Louise looked at the stranger at the door and suddenly caught herself thinking, "Lucky the girl he's going to marry will be lucky." Without realizing what it was about him that attracted her attention, she noted his confident gait, his noble bearing, his attractive appearance, and the trail of expensive cologne that followed him drove her crazy. The young man came out of the store with a gorgeous bouquet of flowers. The thought flashed through Louise's mind again. Who is the lucky girl to whom these flowers are intended? The stranger got into the car and drove off briskly. Louise, who was standing next to him, was wet and dirty from the splashing from the wheels. The car sped away, and the girl stood there, almost crying, trying to clean herself up. The first pleasant impression, which at first left a young man, was spoiled. The next morning, Louise came to work. To her surprise, Donna was in no hurry to go anywhere. She was sitting on the living room couch drinking coffee, the aroma of which wafted throughout the house. Saying hello to her hostess, the girl asked in surprise, "Are you alone? And where is your son?" "He is still asleep," answered the woman and took a sip of the fragrant drink. "You don't have to go up to the second floor today. Wipe the dust in the living room and wash the dishes left over from last night's dinner." Louise went to the dining room. She was surprised to see on the table the same bouquet of flowers that had been brought from the store by the stranger who had doused her from the puddle the day before. While the housekeeper washed the dishes, the young master went down to the living room. Turning off the water, Louise found herself an unwilling witness to part of the conversation between mother and son. "This is my life," said the young man, "and it is for me to decide how and with whom to spend it. I think I have the right to express my opinion on this," came Donna's voice. "It seems to you," answered the son and went to the dining room. When he crossed the threshold, the young man stood up in surprise. It was the stranger with the bouquet. "And who are you?" he asked, not very kindly. "Louise," she introduced herself. "I am the housekeeper." "Hey, I see," he said with what she thought was a twinge of squeamishness, and went into the refrigerator. "Can you make an omelet?" "I do, only it's not." Louise wanted to say that cooking was not her job. She preferred to cook her own food. But the young man did not want to hear her out. Apparently, it was not in his habits. "Then make it quick," he said. "I don't have much time." Louise didn't want to spoil her relationship with the landlady's son, so she took out a frying pan and began to fry an omelet. She often made this dish for breakfast in the mornings, so it was as good as a professional cook. It's been a long time since I've had an omelet like that," said Austin. "You surprised me." "Thank you." Louise realized that she was pleased with Austin's praise. At that moment, Donna entered the dining room. Now she was in full dress, as always. "I see you two have met," she said. "Thank you, Louise, for breakfast. You can be free. But don't forget to dust the living room." After finishing her work, the girl walked along the road towards the institute and replayed in her head the events of the last 2 days. Something was wrong with Donna and Austin's relationship. For all his external attractiveness, there was something repulsive in the young man's behavior. On the one hand, that gorgeous bouquet for his mother, and at the same time, the rude conversation with her in the morning. Louise remembered with what impatience Donna waited for her son, and now they behaved as if they were strangers to each other. She couldn't stop asking herself, why did Austin have such an attitude toward the closest person to her? What could she have done to displease him? And what were they arguing about in the living room? A familiar voice interrupted her thought process. Louise turned her head and saw Austin sitting behind the wheel of the very car that had doused her the day before. He was smiling with his mouth full of white teeth like a Hollywood actor. While Louise was gathering her thoughts, the young man repeated his question. "How far are you going? I can give you a ride." "No, thank you," she replied. "I'm almost there." "Well, as you wish," Austin said with a shrug of his shoulders and drove off sharply. One day, Louise came in when Donna was no longer home. After cleaning up, the girl was about to leave, but Austin stopped her. "Are you leaving already?" he asked. "I was going to ask you to clean my room." Louise took a vacuum cleaner, a rag, a bucket of water, and went up to the second floor. All the time she was skillfully operating the vacuum cleaner. Austin stood in the doorway and watched the cleaning. At one point, Louise felt out of place. "Is something wrong?" she asked. No, it's great. I love watching other people work. Have you tried getting a job?" Austin didn't like Louise's question. He wrinkled his nose and concluded, "You're impertinent," and then added, clearly wanting to put her in her place. "But what can you take from a housekeeper? You've hardly been taught manners." "I see you didn't go to etiquette school either," Louise suggested in the same tone. "If you'll allow me, I'll take over." "Of course, the money has to be paid," Austin said and left the room. Having finished cleaning, Louise went downstairs. Austin was lying on the sofa in the living room. When he saw the housekeeper, he stood up and looked at her from head to toe and asked, "Is it over already? So soon? Check it out. If there's anything wrong, I'll fix it." With a hum, the young man went upstairs. After a minute, he looked out of his room and said, "That'll do for the first time." "Thank you, and that's it," Louisa replied and headed for the exit. "Why did your mother take you?" he said to her. "You're always in a hurry. What if I need a housekeeper tonight?" "Donna is quite satisfied with my candidacy." The girl was not confused. "You should hire someone else. You're too talkative," the young man said irritably. "This is no way for a servant to behave. And you find yourself a deaf mute. She will not hear your rudeness and will not cross you," Louisa replied and disappeared behind the door. Austin shook his head unhappily and went back to his room. He wasn't used to being spoken to like this. Usually girls looked him in the mouth, trying to please the enviable beau. But now some housekeeper had taken the liberty of speaking to him disrespectfully. It really hurt the young man. And at the same time, Austin was impressed by Louise's boldness and sharp wit. The next day, the young master got up early. Louise caught him in the kitchen as he rummaged in the refrigerator. Donna was finishing her coffee and giving her son advice on what to eat for breakfast. "Maybe our housekeeper could make me something," Austin suggested, looking at Louisa. The girl looked at him, then at her hostess. Catching her questioning look, Donna said, "Louisa, if it's not too much trouble for you, feed my hungry son. At the end of the month, I'll recalculate your paycheck." The housekeeper quickly threw on an apron and started preparing breakfast. Meanwhile, the housekeeper said goodbye to the household and left for work. While Austin devoured Ova's cheesecakes, she began to clean up. Wiping the dust in the office, the girl felt a stare. Turning around, she saw Austin standing on the doorstep, watching her every move. "Did you need something?" she asked. "I wanted to thank you for the cheesecakes," he said. "I'm glad you liked them." The girl wanted to continue her work, but she noticed that Austin was not leaving. "Anything else?" she asked. "You're feeding me breakfast," the young man replied. "Let me take you to lunch." "Thanks, but I eat lunch at the Institute in the cafeteria." "I see. Where do you get the money for restaurants?" "But don't worry. If I invite you, I pay." "You're an amazing man," she said, apparently wanting to thank you. "You managed to offend. I do not need your restaurants. I trust the canteen at the Institute more." "Come on, don't pout." Austin tried to reconcile. "I don't understand your stubbornness either. You're invited to a restaurant, and you refuse." "Aren't you used to rejection?" Louise suggested. "Usually girls jump to the ceiling when I ask them to spend time with me," Austin admitted. "I've had enough of your company here," she retorted, "and your ceilings are high. I can't jump, so I'm not going to try." "Okay, we don't have time for lunch, so why don't we have dinner tonight? If you don't want to go to a restaurant, let's go to a cafe or a canteen," he said and grinned. "Maybe I'll like it there too." "I don't think so," Louisa replied. "Dine with your sportswoman where you're used to. I'll make do with homemade cutlets." "Well, as you like," said Austin, not hiding his displeasure. "But if you change your mind, let me know. My offer still stands." "Are you in a hurry again?" Austin asked when Louise was about to leave. "Should my room be cleaned?" "You were asleep. I didn't want to wake you," she replied. "I have to go to the Institute. If you can't wait until tomorrow to clean, I can come back after school. Do me a favor." After class, Louisa went to work. Donna wasn't home yet, but Austin welcomed her with open arms. "I thought you weren't coming." Ignoring her young master's nagging, Louise changed into her work clothes and headed upstairs. What was her surprise when she entered Austin's room? Orderly and clean, everything was in its proper place. The surprised housekeeper turned to the young man who had followed her and asked, "Did you clean it yourself?" Do you think I can't even tidy my own room? He answered her question with a question. I didn't say that, Louise remarked. Then why did you have to invite me? It's a good thing the Institute is within walking distance of your house. Otherwise, you wouldn't be lured to dinner, Austin explained. What dinner? She asked, not hiding her annoyance. I have to go to kindergarten. My child is waiting for me, and I'm going to have dinner here. While Austin was digesting what the housekeeper had said, Louise went downstairs, changed her clothes, and headed out. She was stopped at the door by the young master. So you have a child? And you're breaking like a girl, he said, and grabbed her arm and pulled her to him. Louise didn't have time to realize what was happening when Austin pressed her against the wall and started kissing her. The girl tried to resist, but the forces were unequal. With one hand, the guy held her arms, and the other was already getting under her skirt. Let me go, Louise demanded. I'll tell Dawn everything. And I'll tell her that you attacked me, Austin replied with a sneer in his voice. Who is she going to believe? Her son or some cleaning lady? Let me go, she said, trying to get away. Don't you have enough groupies? What do you need me for? The girl's fierce resistance made the young man even more eager. His kisses became more and more demanding, and his hands roamed all over her body. In one motion, Austin pulled Louise down onto the couch and began to undo the buttons of her blouse. There are a lot of admirers, but they get boring, he admitted in a burst of passion. They're just a whistle away. And you're not like that. Then let me go, Louise begged. I don't want to be like this. Austin had no time to say anything when his mother's voice came from behind him. What's going on here? She asked menacingly. Austin jumped up from the sofa like a scalded man and said, smoothing his hair and clothes with his hands, I didn't hear you come in. I noticed, Donna parried. So what's going on here? Louise rose to follow Austin. Burning with shame, she hid her eyes and tried to tidy her clothes. Excuse me, Donna, the housekeeper said in a low voice. She wanted to explain the situation, but Austin interrupted her. Mom, we're adults to answer to you, he said. It seemed to me that Louise did not enjoy your caresses. You imagined it, replied the young man. No, I didn't. Louise had interrupted him. I'm sorry, Donna, but I'm not going to work in your house anymore. I took a job as a housekeeper. It's not my job to please your son. You have nothing to apologize to me for, said the landlady. I'm the one who needs to apologize to you. Go home. We'll talk tomorrow. Louise grabbed her bag and quickly ran out of the house. She wanted to forget this nightmare as quickly as possible, but the scent of Austin's expensive cologne followed her all the way home. It wasn't until she took a shower that she was able to get rid of the intrusive scent. The next morning, Donna called Louise herself and asked her to come to her house. Austin wouldn't be there, she warned, but we need to talk. Half an hour later, Louise was already at Donna's house. Don't be angry with my son, she asked. He thinks money can buy everything and everyone. It's probably my fault. Like any loving mother, I always wanted the best for him, so I worked 20 hours a day. Austin was left to his own devices. When he was little, he had a nanny, but when he grew up and became independent, that's when the problem started. As is often the case when parents are very busy, the teenager got involved with a bad company, fell in love with the girl who at that time was already on the record in the police. The boy, who for 7 years of schooling had shown great promise, seemed to be replaced. He became rude, left home, skipped lessons at school. Persuasion and pleas didn't work. In order to pull him out of this company, I had to change my place of residence and the school my son attended. Austin was very worried about parting with this girl, blamed me for all the deadly sins. For a few years, our relationship was very strained, but gradually my son got his head on straight. He graduated from school with a silver medal and entered the institute. Everything seemed to be back to normal, but the spoiled relationship with my son never fully recovered. In his eyes, I remained forever busy mom, who first deprived him of his father, and then his favorite girl. But it's been so long. Louise couldn't contain her emotions. Your Austin is a grown man. He's only grown up, Donna replied, but in his heart, he's still a hurt little child who takes revenge for his wrongs whenever he gets the chance. But you said he was on an internship, Louise recalled. Yes, Austin had graduated with honors and had been offered a position with a well-known company, but he had to do an internship first. I hoped that being away from me would change him. And I thought it would, but yesterday I caught you. It wasn't my fault, Louise said. I was about to leave, but I believe you. The landlady interrupted her. You don't have to justify yourself to me. I thought my son liked you, and I hoped that you and he could have a relationship. But I guess I was wrong again. I don't think I'm the right girl for him, Louise said. We have different attitudes to life and people. Maybe, agreed Donna, but I still want to ask you not to leave my house. I've grown attached to you, and it's hard to find decent, honest people like you these days. After a short pause, Louise shook her head and said, No, Donna, I'm sorry, but I don't want to see your son again. I thought so, the woman admitted, and taking an envelope with a few bills from her dresser drawer, handed it to the housekeeper. This is your paycheck. Thank you for your work, but you should think about it. Maybe you'll change your mind. A few days passed after Louise was fired from Donna's house. During the time she'd been working, she'd been able to put aside some money, which now came in handy. The allowance from the state was also a good help. Not to say that the sisters did not need anything, but they were not poor either. Louise's main concern was that the guardianship authorities would not come to check on them. Louise, will they take me back to the orphanage? Marta asked her sister every now and then. No, they won't, Louisa answered. I'll find another job soon. But in a pinch, I'll go to Donna. She promised to help. It's a shame you don't work for Aunt Donna anymore. I liked her, Martha confided to her sister on the walk. I liked her too, agreed Louise. But unfortunately, we can't always do what we want to do. Why don't we visit her? Martha suggested it. She won't kick us out, will she? She won't, confirmed her big sister. But let's do it some other time. Why some other time? Suddenly, a man's voice came from behind the sisters sitting on the bench. My man will be glad to see you. The girls turned around. Austin was standing behind them with a bouquet in his hands. Hearing the familiar voice, Louise flinched. All these days, she had been trying to forget about the incident, and she certainly hadn't expected to see him in the yard of her own house. Who are you? Martha inquired. The young man walked around the bench and squatted down in front of the girl, extended his hand to her and introduced himself. Uncle Austin, what's your name? Martha, she answered cheerfully and pointing to the flowers asked, And who are these for? Your mom, the man said and handed the bouquet to Louise. My mom is dead, and Louise is my sister, the girl explained. Martha's words confused Austin. I'm sorry. He turned to Martha. I didn't know. What are you doing here? Louise asked, making it clear that she was not happy to see him. I came to apologize for my behavior. I don't know what came over me. Take these flowers as a token of reconciliation. I forgive you, but I won't take the flowers, Louisa replied and went home. Louisa, I was going to ask you to come back to work. No, I promise to behave. I'm not sure you know anything about decorum. Everybody can make mistakes, Austin said in his defense, but you have to be able to forgive. I said I forgave you, the girl reminded him, but I'm not going to work for you anymore. What can I do to make you change your mind? Why such persistence? I'm sure there will be a lot of people willing to take my place. By the way, maybe they'll be more cooperative. Austin, who was not accustomed to long persuasion, could hardly contain his irritation. I wouldn't have insisted if it hadn't been for my mother, he admitted. She's been giving me a hard time. How did you win her over? Louise is the best. Martha stood up for her sister. The young man looked at the girl and then back at the former housekeeper. Think it over, he said. We won't hurt your wages. Putting the bouquet on the bench, Austin walked quickly to the car. In a minute, he was already behind the house. Martha looked at him and said, What a nasty uncle. Did you leave Aunt Donna because of him? Yes, she admitted. I didn't like him at first either. It's a shame you don't work there anymore, Martha said on the way home. The sisters never returned to the subject again, but it didn't take Austin long. A couple of days later, he met Louise after school. Are you following me? She asked irritably. Finally, you stopped yelling at me, the young man remarked. I think we're even closer now. Why did you come here? Louise repeated the question. I wanted to see if you had changed your mind. No. That's a pity. Mammon's having a hard time. Austin paused, as if waiting for a clarifying question, but when he didn't, he continued. I was hoping your return would get her back on her feet quickly. What does that mean? Louise didn't understand. Didn't I say? Mom and stumbled on the porch and fell and broke her leg. Now she's sitting at home, telling me every minute how bad I am. Why didn't you tell me this before? The girl got worried. Are you driving? We're in the car, Austin replied with a smirk. Will you even get in my car? If you don't mind, Louise said and followed him. Austin turned the key in the ignition and pressed the gas pedal. The car squealed and sped forward like a rocket. Louise's breath caught in her throat. Don't be afraid. I'll take you home like an airplane, the driver promised. The main thing is not to take off early, she replied, holding tightly to the handle. And you with humor, noted the young man and grinned. Soon the car pulled up outside Donna's house. Austin got out of the car and called out to his mother, but no one answered. Stepping over the threshold of the house, he shouted, "My man, look who I brought you." Louise appeared at the door. She immediately saw the owner sitting on the sofa in the living room with a plastered leg. Donna was overjoyed to see her guest. "What a surprise," she exclaimed. "Unexpected, but very pleasant. Have you changed your mind and decided to come back?" "Come in." "Well, why are you standing on the doorstep like a stranger?" Donna was genuinely happy to see Louisa. She didn't know where to sit her or what to serve her. "Well, you two talk," Austin said, going upstairs. "When you go home," he said to Louise, "call me. I'll drive you." "Thank you," she replied, "but I know the way. I'll try myself." "As you wish." The landlady and the former housekeeper sat over a cup of tea and talked like good old friends. Donna was interested in the girl's studies, her plans for the future, asked about her younger sister, and did not fail to complain about the accident that had happened to her 2 days ago. But most of the time the woman talked about her son. "I think Austin has begun to grow up," she admitted. "He is changing in front of my eyes. He stopped being rude, became more restrained and patient, helps me around the house. And most importantly, he went to work. It's about time he got his head on straight." "Yes," Donna agreed, "but I think you can take credit for that." "Me?" Louise was surprised. "You're exaggerating. I haven't worked for you for half a month. It was after you left that I started to notice a change in my son. Maybe he's fallen in love with you." "Donna, don't make this up. I'm just a servant for your son, a cleaning lady. Men like him don't even look at men like me. And frankly, I'm not crazy about Austin." "You should look at him, though," Mom said. "He's not bad at heart. Austin was great when he was a kid. If it hadn't been for his exposure to bad company." "I understand," Louise interrupted her. "Like a loving mother, you idealize your child. But Austin's grown up now, and he has to take responsibility for his actions." "You're right, Louise. You're absolutely right. But everyone can make mistakes. Give him a chance. I see the way he looks at you. You're not like the rest of his girlfriends, mercantile, glossy, capricious dolls who are used to having fun and doing nothing. You're real. You're just like me when I was young. That's probably why I'm so attached to you." "I am flattered to hear you say that," Louisa replied. "But don't try to set me up with your son. I am not sure that we both need it." The conversation was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Austin. Glancing at the clock on the wall, he asked the guest, "Aren't you going to be late for kindergarten?" Louise jumped up like a scalded woman. "Oh, I've forgotten all about the time," she confessed. "Donna, get well. I'll visit you again, with your permission. Or maybe you can come back to us at least for a while," the landlady asked, "until I get better." Louise was taken by surprise by her landlady's request. She didn't want to see Austin every day, but she couldn't say no to someone in need. "Okay, I'll go to work tomorrow," she promised and headed for the exit. "Can I give you a ride after all?" Austin asked. "I'm going your way. I won't bother you," he promised and grinned. "Come on, Louise." Donna joined in. "You'll have a long ride on public transportation, and the daycare center will be closed by then." "All right," she said, and followed Austin. Almost the whole way, the young people drove in silence. Stopping near the garden, Austin suddenly asked, "I do not understand why you have taken on all this trouble. You yourself are not yet firmly on your feet, and then there is your sister. Where am I supposed to put her?" Louise asked. "Well, there are boarding schools, orphanages," he began to enumerate. "I have no doubt that if you were in my place, you would have done the same thing. I love my sister. But you probably don't understand that." She was about to get out of the car, but Austin stopped her. Why are you making a monster of me? I thought I already apologized for my behavior. I just wanted to say that it's hard to carry a baby on your own, especially in your situation. Yes, Louise agreed. It's a difficult position to be in. But Martha's my sister, and I'm the only one she's got. She has no one else to rely on. I will never abandon or betray her. That is commendable, said Austin with his usual grin. You decided to put your youth on her, and then she'll grow up and won't thank you for it. You shouldn't judge people by themselves. Not everyone grows up ungrateful, Louise retorted. I don't do it for thanks. Perhaps I need it more than she does, but you don't understand that. Louise got out of the car and headed for the kindergarten. Austin stared after her until she disappeared around the corner. The housekeeper's words had hurt his ego. He hated to hear that he was an ungrateful, insensitive man, but she was right about something. Pressing the gas pedal, he drove off briskly and quickly disappeared. All the way he pondered Louise's words and analyzed his life. So far, everything had suited him. Austin considered himself a reasonably intelligent, educated, well-bred man. He was in demand with the opposite sex and authority among friends. He was used to people looking at his mouth and fawning over him. And here's some girl who knew nothing about his life, constantly wiping his nose. On the one hand, he found himself thinking that he liked Louise. Unlike the others, she did not ingratiate herself with him. On the contrary, she openly expressed her opinion. But at the same time, that was what annoyed him about her. Sometimes Austin felt that his mother's housekeeper thought too much of herself. The man, engrossed in his thoughts, did not notice that he had reached the house. Once inside, he saw that his mother was still sitting in the same place. At some point, the man felt his heart squeeze. "Mom, do you need help?" he asked. Donna flinched in surprise. "No," she said, and then suddenly added, "This is the first time you've called me Mom in a long time. I've been mom and mother to you for a long time. Did something happen?" "No," Austin answered. "I just suddenly realized that I have no one else but you." Tears glistened in the woman's eyes. Austin, pretending not to notice, went quickly upstairs and hid in his room. The next day, Louise arrived at Donna's house as promised. Austin wasn't home, but his mother wouldn't stop talking about him. "You know, Austin's changed a lot since he met you. I think you're having a very positive effect on him," she shared with the housekeeper. "Don't exaggerate, Donna," the girl asked. "I don't take any credit for it. It's just that people change. Your son must have realized that you are the closest and dearest person to him." Having finished cleaning, Louisa said goodbye to the landlady and went to the institute. After class, she got an unexpected surprise. Austin met her on the way to the bus stop. He was holding a small but beautiful bouquet. "Hi, these are for you," he said and handed them to Louise. At times like this, Louise felt awkward. She still didn't trust Austin. It seemed to her that a man could not have changed so dramatically in such a short time. "It's unnecessary," she said, looking at the flowers. "Why did you come here? First of all, the flowers are a thank you for my mother. Thank you for helping her. Second, stop yelling at me. I'm only 5 years older than you. You don't have to thank me for something I do with heart and pleasure, especially not for free. Give those flowers to Donna." "You again?" Austin looked at the girl reproachfully. "I will stop howling if you promise not to come to my institute with flowers anymore," she said. "I don't want my classmates to start gossiping about me." "What's wrong with a girl's boyfriend coming to pick her up?" he asked. "You're not my boyfriend," Louise reminded him. "All right," agreed the young man. "I promise not to compromise you again. Just take this bouquet." Louise sighed and took the flowers. "I can give you a ride to the garden," Austin offered. "It's not worth it. I'd rather take the bus. It's safer that way." Austin grinned his trademark smile and replied, "I promise to drive slowly and deliver it safely on time." "Okay," Louise gave in, one last time. The young man headed towards Austin's automobile. To the girl's surprise, he was as gallant and attentive as ever. Ahead of her by a few steps, the man opened the door in front of the passenger and kindly offered her his hand. It did not go unnoticed by Louise that this time Austin drove the car slowly and carefully. At some point, it seemed to her that there was a completely different person beside her. Not so long ago, the arrogant snob had magically transformed himself into a well-mannered, intelligent man, pleasant in every way. On the one hand, Louise liked this change in him. On the other hand, it frightened her, something fake about it. "What are you thinking about?" Austin asked, noticing the passenger's absent gaze out the window. "About how a man can change in a few days," replied Louise. "Are you referring to me?" he clarified. "Yes, I don't believe in such metamorphoses," she admitted. "You're obviously up to something. I just don't know what it is." "You're wrong," the young man tried to persuade her. "It was my behavior before that was fake. I'm used to acting like that," he admitted. "Women like confident, persistent, goal-oriented men." "Confident but not cocky," Louise corrected him. "Persistent but not insolent, determined but not pushy." "So you think I'm a pushy, self-assured, impudent man?" Austin concluded. "Yes." Louise's answer discouraged him. He was still unaccustomed to her honesty and directness, and at the same time, it turned him on. No woman had so far stirred his mind as Louise had. Her behavior aroused mixed feelings in him. On the one hand, he was magnetically drawn to her. On the other, he wanted to punish her for her unapproachability and intransigence. "Here we are," Austin announced, stopping outside the nursery. "I'll wait for you here." "No need. It's just a short walk from here to our house. We'll walk with Martha." "I don't mean to be intrusive," the man said, mindful of the conversation. "But could I keep you company?" Louise shrugged her shoulders and headed toward the kindergarten. Her sister ran out to meet her. Noticing Austin behind her, she asked in her ear, "What's he doing here?" "We met by chance," Louise explained in a whisper, "and he offered me a ride." "Did he also give you flowers by chance?" she asked in a whisper, and then she said, "I don't like him anyway, even with flowers." After walking the sisters to the entrance, Austin suddenly suggested, "Maybe on the weekend we can walk in the park or go to the zoo together." "No," Martha replied firmly. "We had other plans." Louise was used to her younger sister's development, and Austin was discouraged by the little girl's answer. But quickly gathering his thoughts, he asked, "Do you have dolls?" "Lots," Martha replied. "Did they have their own dollhouse?" After a short pause, the girl said, "No, they live in my and Louise's house." "But everyone should have their own house," Austin insisted. "Would you like us to buy your dolls a house too?" The pause dragged on. Martha could feel the thought process going on in her head. Like any girl, she wanted a dollhouse, but she still didn't trust Austin. Realizing the reason for the silence, the man turned to Louise. "Do you mind if I give your sister a gift as a sign of reconciliation? I'm not sure it's right or necessary. Let's skip the expensive gifts." "I'm about to get my first paycheck," the man said. "I'd like to spend it on something nice." Louise wanted to reply, but Austin beat her to it, adding, "I promise I won't neglect my mom." "But that was unnecessary," she insisted. "Thank you for the ride and for seeing her off," she said, and taking her sister's hand in hers, she disappeared down the driveway. On the morning of the day off, the girls were in no hurry. They had no special plans, so they lay in their beds and talked. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Jumping up like a scalded woman, Louise ran to the bathroom, shouting on the way, "Who?" "It's me, Austin," came a voice from outside the door. "Wait," commanded the girl and disappeared into the bathroom. Martha had made her bed and her sister's, and after glancing around the room and making sure everything was in order, she opened the door. The man was holding a huge box. As he crossed the threshold, he set it on the floor and said to Martha, "This is for you. Unpack it." The girl looked from the giver to the gift with disbelief. She guessed what was in the box, but did not dare to open it without her sister's permission. "Don't be shy," Austin urged her. "I promised you a doll's house, didn't I? Take it. I'm not going to carry this weight back, am I?" Martha's last argument seemed reasonable, and she began to remove the wrapping. After a hasty shower, Louise came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel. She hadn't expected to see Austin here, so she froze in surprise for a few seconds and then disappeared out the door again. That was enough time for the man to get a glimpse of the housekeeper's chiseled figure. Her smooth legs, graceful arms, straight posture, slim waist, and narrow shoulders were as if chiseled by a talented craftsman. In such a way, Louise stirred Austin's imagination even more. In his mind, he was already imagining her in his arms. He had never wanted a woman so badly in his life. A moment later, Louise came out in the robe she had to get out of the laundry basket. But even in her crumpled housecoat, she looked very attractive and desirable. I told you not to open the door to strangers, she reproached her sister. But he's not a stranger, Martha replied, taking the doll's house out of its wrapping. What the hell is this? Her older sister asked sternly, looking at the toy. Now my dolls will have their own house, the girl said happily. It's too expensive, Louisa said. We can't accept it. Martha, engrossed in the toy, did not even react to her sister's words. But I'm not going to take it back to the store, Austin replied. They won't take it back without its wrapping. Look how happy your sister is. Can't you take it away from her? Then I'll give you the money from my paycheck, Louisa suggested. I will not take money from you, replied the young man. But if you have extra, you can take me to the movies. All right, she agreed. But first, we need breakfast. While Louise made pancakes, Austin helped Martha set up the dollhouse. From the outside, they all looked like a close-knit family. Despite her distrust of the hostess's son, Louise watched her sister and the guests play with amusement. For a moment, she thought that he was indeed a kind and decent man. And the incident of molestation in the drawing room was only a misunderstanding, which Austin had long since repented of. The pancakes are wonderful, praised the hostess. You haven't tasted Louise's cakes yet, Martha added with pride in her voice. Martha, you have to address adults as you, her sister corrected her. Uncle Austin told me to call him you, she said. Louise looked questioningly at the guest. Austin, as if nothing had happened, said, Why the ceremony? I think it's easier to communicate this way. After breakfast, Austin, Louise and Martha went to the biggest shopping and entertainment center in the city. There was everything there, a movie theater, a cafe, a restaurant, a playground. Yes, I'm sorry, Austin replied, getting up from his seat. Time flies with you. Why don't we all go out again sometime? Maybe. Austin stood on the doorstep and looked at Louise. He wanted to kiss her desperately, but he was afraid of ruining the relationship he had just established. Shuffling from foot to foot like a schoolboy, he decided to ask, Can I kiss you? Instantly, the girl's cheeks flushed. She wanted to say no, but her tongue wouldn't listen to her. A second pause, and Louise felt Austin's moist lips on hers. Without wanting to, the girl reached for him. She wrapped her arms around his neck. Austin put his arms around her waist and pulled her to him. This kiss, filled with tenderness and affection, was nothing like that first kiss. Louise felt herself starting to lose control of herself and the situation. But suddenly, Austin pulled her away from him just as gently and said, See you soon. Donna was on the mend quickly. Louise came to her house every day and cleaned her house. She also had to cook meals now. It was good that the vacations had started and the housekeeper had a lot of free time. Martha became a frequent visitor to Donna's house, who was happy to spend time with her while Louise did her chores. Austin rushed home every day after work to spend time with Louise. Donna noticed her son's rapprochement with the housekeeper and did not hide her joy about it. I think Austin has seriously fallen in love with you, she once shared with Louise. It's like he's been replaced. It's true what they say, love works wonders. Louise only smiled at these words and lowered her eyes in embarrassment. She too saw this change, which made her look at the man with different eyes. She felt that she was falling more and more in love with him every day. Alone with Austin, her heart was racing as if it was trying to jump out. Only a little worm in her head kept her mind on her own. It was like it was drilling at the same place, not allowing her to relax and forget. Martha, in spite of her young age, was thinking naturally. Uncle Austin may be a good man, but he's not for you, she told her sister privately. You're different. You seem to like him, don't you? Louise asked. Yes, she confirmed, but he's not real, he's too perfect. When Donna's cast was removed, she was offered to go to a local sanatorium for rehabilitation. Without much thought, the woman agreed, taking a promise from Louisa that she would take care of the house during her absence. Maybe Marta could come with me, the landlady suggested it. It would be a nice change of scenery for the girl, and I would be bored. Martha gladly agreed to Aunt Donna's suggestion, and 2 days later they left for the sanatorium together. That same evening, Austin arranged a romantic candlelight dinner for Louise. Of course, the dinner was prepared by Louise, but while she was busy in the kitchen, He set the table in the living room, dimmed the lights, lit candles, and put on some nice music. What a surprise. The girl was surprised. Like in the best houses of Paris. Why Paris? We're not the best either, I noticed. Demonstratively pushing back his chair, the young man invited Louise to the table. Playing along with him, the girl, lifting her skirt slightly, walked solemnly to the chair and sat down. Austin unsealed a bottle of red wine and filled the glasses. I propose a toast to us, he said. Taking a sip, Louise put the glass back, but Austin made the toast again and again. Even a dense dinner did not relieve the girl, who was not used to alcoholic drinks, from a slight dizziness. Maybe we should dance, Austin suggested, and taking Louise by the hand, led her to the center of the living room. To the quiet, peaceful sounds of music, the young people slowly twirled in a dance. Despite her outward calmness, Louise's insides were trembling. Every touch of Austin stirred her. Her heart periodically tried to jump out of her chest. The wine and the ever-present scent of Austin's cologne were intoxicating. At some point, Louise's legs felt cotton and her eyelids felt heavy. She rested her head on her beau's shoulder and felt his muscles tense. At the same moment, he picked her up in his arms and carried her to his room. "What are you doing?" Louise asked. "Don't say anything," Austin asked in a whisper. Going up to the room, he put her on the bed and laid down next to her. Feeling the girl's inner resistance, he kept her in his arms. "I want you to be mine," he whispered and kissed her. This time his kiss was longer and more demanding than all the previous ones. Louise gasped with desire. That little worm that had been keeping her down until now had disappeared without a trace. She could no longer think or analyze what was happening. She just wanted to enjoy the moment. Louise gave free rein to her feelings and desires. The girl wrapped her two arms around the man's neck and whispered, "Yes." She didn't notice when Austin took off her clothes. In those rare moments of consciousness, Louise only noticed that he was gentle with her, then, like a wild animal, rushed at his prey. The pain and fear faded into the background as Austin whispered sweet words in her ear. Never before had she experienced such a flurry of feelings all at once. She felt like she was going to burst, but she didn't. Unable to contain herself any longer, she moaned. From time to time, her moans turned to screams and then back to silence. Soon, her inner trembling spilled outward. Louise was shaking as if from the cold. Her whole body was whimpering. It was not obeying her. Suddenly, Austin's rapid, rhythmic movements became slower until finally they stopped altogether. With a deep exhalation, the man collapsed beside her. Silence hung in the room. Louise's consciousness suddenly cleared. She slowly pulled the blanket over her, shamefully covering herself. Austin lay with his eyes closed and said nothing. Finally, after a few minutes, he got up and headed for the bathroom. Louise didn't know what she should do. On the one hand, she realized that nothing supernatural had happened between them. On the other hand, she was ashamed of her weakness. While she pondered, Austin showered and returned to her, wrapping his torso in a towel. Seeing the girl's embarrassment, he lay down next to her and asked, "How are you feeling?" "Fine," she replied faintly. "You really didn't have anyone before me," Austin said, as if still in doubt. "I thought there were no more of them left nowadays." Louise said nothing, but pulled the blanket tighter around her. "I'm going to get some water," Austin said. "Would you like some?" The girl nodded and, after waiting for him to leave the room, headed for the bathroom. Standing under the shower, she could still feel Austin's touches and kisses on her body. The recent events flashed through her mind, and his voice echoed in her ears. The warm water gradually brought Louise to her senses. Wrapping a large terry towel around herself, she stepped out of the bathroom. Austin was sprawled out on the bed on top of the blanket, looking at her intently. He had his trademark smirk on his face, which made her uncomfortable. But in the next second, Austin smiled and, patting the vacant spot on the bed next to him, said affectionately, "Come to my place, pretty girl." Louise crouched down next to him on the bed uncomplainingly. Austin put his arm around her shoulders and drew her to him and kissed her. "You're hot," he said jokingly. "I didn't expect you to be so passionate. Would you mind doing it again sometime?" Donna and Martha had been at the sanitarium for 2 weeks. All that time, she had been calling her son and the housekeeper periodically to tell them what she was doing and to ask about news from home. Austin went to work every day, and Louise returned to her studies after a short rest. She was still doing chores, but now she often stayed overnight at Donna's house. Ever since Louise had become close to Austin, she had missed him. He was late from work for a good reason, or he had a meeting with friends, or he had to visit a sick boss. Soon Donna and Martha returned home. The girl had a lot of impressions. She told her sister about the wonderful time she had spent with Aunt Donna at the sanatorium. Louise was happy for her, but she couldn't hide her worries about the changes in her life from her hostess. "Tell me what's going on with you and Austin," the woman asked when she was alone with the housekeeper. "Everything is fine," Louise replied, embarrassed by her question. "You don't have to lie to me," Donna asked. "I was happy to learn that you had started a relationship with my son, but I don't see joy in your eyes." "I'm glad," Louise said, "but I think Austin's been spending less time with me. I think he's gotten colder." "Don't make it up," Donna reassured her. "It's just that men can't devote themselves to a woman completely. It's us women who dissolve into them when we fall in love." Louise continued to run the household at Austin's mother's house, but after her return, she no longer stayed overnight. Austin didn't insist. After seeing Louise home, he would go about his business and often return well past midnight. Donna did not like her son's late nights out, but she did not give him away, hoping that he would come to his senses and change. As time passed, however, nothing much changed. The woman noticed how sad her housekeeper was. She felt sorry for her, so she decided to intervene. "Austin, we need to talk," she said sternly one day to her son, who was going to another meeting with his friends. "Mother, not now," he asked her. The word mother cut Donna's hearing. Austin had been calling her mom lately, and she was insanely pleased with it. What had happened today? Why mom again? "Did something happen to you?" she asked. "Trouble at work?" "No, everything's fine there. I'm still getting a tiny salary," the son replied in a disgruntled tone. "I've offered you many times to go into business with me," the woman reminded him. "I don't want my mother to be my boss," Austin said. "When you're ready to retire, then call me." "What's the matter with Louise?" she asked me directly. "What do you mean?" Austin pretended not to understand. "Don't pretend. Louise is a good girl. She'll make a fine wife. You're lucky she paid attention to you." "What? She took notice of me," he interjected dismissively. "She should be thanking the universe that a man like me came her way." At that time, the housekeeper had finished cleaning and was on her way to the living room to say goodbye to the owners. The conversation between mother and son made her stop outside the door. Louise had never allowed herself to eavesdrop on other people's conversations before, but this one concerned her directly, so she put her ear to the keyhole for a better hearing and froze. "I'm sure she's grateful," her mother parried. "You've been dating for months now. When are you going to propose to her?" "What are you talking about, Mom?" I asked a normal question. When young people date, they make plans for the future. "Are you thinking of marrying Louise?" "No, of course not." Austin grinned. "Who am I? And who is she? Do you think I'm going to marry some housekeeper?" "She's only a housekeeper because of circumstances," the landlady said. "But you know she's about to get her high school diploma, right?" "So what?" Austin didn't give up. "What difference does it make? She's a simpleton. I'm attracted to more interesting girls, with big boobs and empty heads." Donna got angry. "I wish she was. There's no shame in going out with them." "Austin, I had a better opinion of you," she admitted. "I thought you were a smart, serious, forward-thinking man, and you still can't get over it." "Mother, don't lecture me," he asked. "I won't let you hurt Louise. The girl has been through enough in this life." "I'm not going to hurt her," the man replied. "Isn't that how it works? You meet and then you run away." Seeing that her son could not be persuaded, Donna bitterly waved her hand and left the living room. Frustrated, she headed for the stairs, not even noticing the housekeeper standing outside the door. Louise didn't move. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. She realized that Austin had deceived her. When she returned home, she cried into her pillow all night. The next morning, she woke up with a firm decision to sever all relations with the family in whose house she had worked for many months. Arriving at Donna's house, Louise made her way to the landlady's house. Austin had already left for work. Trying to hide the traces of her worries from the housekeeper, the landlady asked with a smile, "How are you, Louise? How's Martha?" Not wanting to beat around the bush, the girl said directly, "Donna, I heard you talking to your son yesterday. You do realize that under these circumstances I can't continue to work in your house. Maybe things will change," she said with hope in her voice. "Maybe Austin would come to his senses. You can't force a favor," Louise said firmly, "and I don't like to talk to him and pretend that nothing has happened." "Yes, I understand," agreed the landlady. "You're probably right. I'm sorry about what happened." "It wasn't your fault," Louise replied. "You don't have to apologize to me for your son. He is a grown man and he can take responsibility for his own actions." Louise hadn't worked at Donna's house for several days. She was completely absorbed in her studies to get Austin out of her mind. Martha realized that something was going on with her sister, but she didn't ask her questions unless she got an answer. Donna, feeling guilty, didn't abandon the girls. She often came to visit them with gifts. The women tried not to bring up the subject of Austin, pretending that he did not exist. When Donna came to visit her sisters again, she said, "Louise, I have an offer for you that you can't refuse." Intrigued, smiled the girl. "I want to take you into my business," she informed me. "In a few months, you'll get your diploma and you'll be looking for a job. I suggest you skip the job search and come to me for an internship right now." "But I probably won't be able to do that," Louise said nervously. "I don't understand anything about your business." "What am I for?" Donna asked cheerfully. "I'll teach you everything. If you want to leave and work in your specialty, I won't hold you back. And if you like it, I promise you career advancement and a good salary." "Say yes, Louise." Martha jumped up and down. After a moment's thought, Louise smiled and nodded in agreement. "I'll do my best," she promised. "Thank you." A few months flew by. All this time, Louise was writing her thesis and interning at Donna's company. The former owner, now director, was pleased with the new employee. Louise was a quick learner. She quickly joined the team and earned the respect of her colleagues. Now she devoted all her free time to herself and her little sister. Louise, knowing about her natural beauty, nevertheless, following the advice of her boss, began to visit beauty salons, watch her appearance, updated her closet, and enrolled in the gym. For a diamond to become a diamond, it needs a professional cut, Donna liked to say. And Louise had learned that. Young men looked at her and tried to ask her out every now and then. But Louise didn't have affairs at work. The memories of her failed relationship with Austin were still fresh in her mind. The girl was not ready to jump into the maelstrom again. One day, the director of the company came to work in a bad mood. Never before had she allowed herself to raise her voice at her subordinates, and on this day her shouting was heard from the very morning. Employees did not leave their workplaces, afraid to be seen by her. After gathering her courage, Louisa entered the principal's office and saw that the woman who had just raged was standing at the window, wiping tears from her face. "Donna, is something wrong?" Louisa ran up to her and asked, "Can I help you?" The principal didn't react to her words for a while, but then she turned, looked at the girl carefully, and answered, "Austin is going to get married." The news hit Louise like a blow to the head. All this time she had been trying in vain to forget Austin. She couldn't say that she still loved him, but his desire to marry someone else had hurt her feelings. Louise swallowed the lump in her throat and said as calmly as she could, "It had to happen sometime. Maybe Austin will settle down now. I hoped until the last day that he'd come to his senses and come back to you," Donna admitted. "I am flattered by your words," Louisa replied, "but I don't think I could forgive him, so let him be happy with his girlfriend." The headmistress hugged the girl and smiled with sadness in her eyes. What a pity my son never realized what goal he had lost. From now on, Louisa spent a lot of time in the principal's office. Donna wanted to share her worries about the upcoming celebration with someone, and she found no better listener than Louise. The last thing she wanted to know was the details of the preparations for Austin's marriage, but she didn't dare to tell his mother, so she listened to her stories for hours. It was clear from Donna's remarks that she wasn't happy with her daughter-in-law. "A narcissistic painted doll," she said of her, born with a golden spoon in her mouth and never took it out her whole life. Her father spoiled her, instilled in her that everything is bought and sold, and when he was gone, he died 3 years ago. His wife, a slacker, spent all his $1 million fortune on lovers. Now, with no one to help her, she decides to set up her daughter. What they don't know is that Austin's broke and living off me. Why don't you tell them? Louise asked. Why should I? Jasmine comes to our house and talks to me for hours about her great love for my son. Why destroy such love? And Austin? Does he love her? I don't know. Sometimes I don't think he's capable of feeling that way at all. I've decided to stay out of his life. Let them live as they please. Finally, the day finally arrived. Despite Donna's pleas for a low-key wedding celebration, the young couple feasted on the world. Of course, it was not without the financial support of mothers. Donna immediately warned her son that the wedding and the wedding gift will be her last investment in him. And the mother of the bride collected the remnants of the untold wealth of her deceased husband and gave them to her daughter's wedding on the condition that after marriage, she will return everything to her with more than enough. After the festivities, the newlyweds went on a wedding trip, which Donna gave them, and she herself returned to work. The director answered congratulations and questions from her subordinates dryly and reluctantly. One could sense that the woman was worried about her son's future, but she did not change her principles. He is a grown man, not stupid, with a good education, Louise reassured Austin's mother. He'll be fine. You'll laugh when you remember how you shed tears for nothing. How kind you are, Donna said, not hiding her admiration. God give you a good fiancé. He will, laughed the girl, all in good time. My man, I want to talk to you, said Austin on his return from the wedding trip. Let's talk, Donna agreed. Are you in some kind of trouble? No, the man was miffed. I just wanted to learn your business from the inside, so to speak. Well, this is unexpected. You've always been against the mother superior. Everything in this world is changeable, Austin replied philosophically. I changed my mind. Maybe you'll want to hand over your authority to me too, when you're convinced that I'm doing a good job with your enterprise. Austin and his young wife had returned from a wedding trip the day before. Being weary on the road, they went straight to their room, whence they did not come out all the evening. It was not until the next morning, while Jasmine was lying in bed, that Austin came into the parlor and had an unexpected conversation with his mother. Well, I don't mind, Donna said. My business is going to be lambasted by you anyway, so it's better to get into it beforehand. When are you planning on going to work? Oh, we could do it today. I don't think I'll get into the process right away, so first I'll get to know the staff, get used to the office. Mother grinned and looked at her watch and said, Then you have 15 minutes. I don't like my employees to be late. I'll wait for you at the car. While Austin searched for a clean iron shirt, the time for packing was over. He kissed his sleeping wife at the last moment and got into the car with his mother, who had already left. I didn't even have time for breakfast, he complained. Why didn't your wife see you off? The woman asked. Jasmine is still asleep. Doesn't she have to go to work today? My man, what are you doing? Austin grinned. In her family, women don't work. Ours do, Donna retorted. Or does she think I'm going to feed and clothe her for the rest of her life? I will. Austin stood up for his lady. I'll be able to provide for my woman and then for my children. And what will your woman do? Home. A wife's duty is to keep the hearth and bear children. Donna looked at her son in silence and continued to follow the road. Soon they arrived at the factory. Austin walked in step with his mother, trying to establish himself as a strict boss in front of his subordinates from the first minutes. He had been to his parents' kingdom many times as a teenager, but then he had been here as a guest, and now he had come with the purpose of taking the throne. Practically nothing had changed here, Austin noticed, just more employees. Yes, production is expanding, business is booming, Donna agreed. With the right management, it's a profitable business. We're here. Where? Austin didn't understand. Your office, if memory serves, is on the top floor. I thought I'd be sitting next to you. Sitting, my dear son, is not going to work, she replied. If you're here to work, you'll have to work hard. I'm used to being alone in my office. Here's your workplace. The director pointed to a vacant desk among the other desks where the employees were working. Austin glanced around the large workshop and looked at his mother with a puzzled look. You're not going to put me in the shop, are you? He asked. You wanted to get to know the production from the inside, she reminded him. When you master the technology, I will transfer you to the quality department. Mom, but I'm your son. Austin was indignant. You're my employee here. The director replied, turned around and walked toward the stairs. If something is unclear, ask your colleagues. The man did not argue with his mother, deciding to continue the conversation in the evening at home. It was not until lunchtime that he managed to have breakfast and lunch. Sitting at the table with a bored look, he watched the workers. Suddenly, his gaze stopped on a very elegant young woman. It was clear from her demeanor and mannerisms that she held not a small position in this enterprise. Mesmerized by her beauty and grace, Austin did not immediately recognize the well-groomed, blooming young woman as Louise. He had, of course, heard from his mother that she had invited her former housekeeper to join her at the company, but he had not expected to see such a change in her. There was not a trace of that simpleton left. She walked with a confident stride, responding to the greetings of the employees with a slight nod. Austin, as if mesmerized, did not take his eyes off her. The episodes of their date suddenly appeared in his mind. He remembered how he pursued her, and once he'd gotten her, he lost interest. It seemed to him that he even remembered the taste and smell of the food she cooked. "Have you had lunch yet?" came his mother's voice from upstairs. Looking up, Austin saw his mother and nodded to her. She put the tray of food on the table and sat down across from her son. "Have you changed your mind about working at my company?" she asked. Austin looked at Louise and asked, "Who does your housekeeper work here?" "You mean Louise?" the woman clarified. "She's my right-hand woman. I don't know how I managed without her. When I'm away, she runs the place." "Wow, so some housekeeper is the boss and the director's son is just a laborer." "Louise learned the manufacturing process from scratch, and she's a quick study," Donna said. "If you try as hard as she did, you'll soon have your own office." Austin wasn't excited about the prospect. He'd assumed he'd be in charge right away, but he'd miscalculated. If it hadn't been for his wife, he would have left his mother that very day. But Jessamine insisted that it was time for him to take the whole business into his own hands, not to depend on his mother. So the man got up and headed into the shop to his workplace. "Hello, dear." Met Jessamine, her husband, after the first day of work at the new place. "How are you doing?" "Normal," Austin replied in a tired voice. "What are we having for dinner tonight?" "I thought we were going out to a restaurant to celebrate your first day as boss." "Jessamine, what restaurant? What boss? I don't think I've ever been as tired as I am today." "What were you doing?" the girl asked. "Working. So we're not going to the restaurant," she said, stretching her lips. "Well, what is it, mistress?" "Set the table." Donna, who had just entered the house, asked and went to her room. After changing her clothes, she went down to the dining room and, seeing the empty table, asked, "Are we having dinner tonight?" "Mom, Jessamine suggested we celebrate my new assignment at the restaurant," Austin said. "What's there to celebrate?" The woman was surprised. "When you become a boss, then we'll celebrate. Until then, I see no reason to celebrate." "I do not understand," admitted Jessamine. "And now you are what, if not the boss?" "And now your husband is an ordinary employee in the shop," explained his mother. "A good boss is the one who rose to this post from below." The mother-in-law's answer dumbfounded her daughter-in-law. At first, she stood with her mouth open and silently flapped her eyes, and then she grinned. "My husband's a laborer?" "Yes," Donna confirmed. "You can be proud of him. He's a hard worker. What have you been doing all day?" "I went to my mom's, and then I went to the beauty parlor with her." "I just got back," said Jessamine. "I'm really tired and hungry. Why don't we go to a restaurant after all?" Austin looked at his mother, but she turned and went into the kitchen. "Jessamine," he turned to his wife, "I spent a lot of money on vacation. The paycheck isn't due for a while. If we go to the restaurant now, we'll be broke by the end of the month." "What are you talking about?" she asked with irritation in her voice. "I married one of the richest men in town, and now you're telling me that we don't have any money. You know what kind of spending we've been doing for the last month, don't you? My card isn't unlimited. Ask your mother. She won't refuse her only son." "I'm not sure that's a good idea," Austin replied. "We're adults and we have to support ourselves. She doesn't have to support us. She's got a good job." Jessamine was indignant, referring to her mother-in-law. "She earns so much money and lives with her son. When you were single, all right, someone had to look after you. But now that you're married, you might want to think about moving out." "Where would she go?" Austin asked. "It's her house." "Why does she need such a big house all by herself? We have a family, we'll have children." An apartment would be enough for her. At that moment, Donna appeared in the living room where the newlyweds were. "Let's go to dinner," she called her son and daughter-in-law. Already sitting at the table, she warned Austin's wife, "Don't think it's going to be like this every day. There's never been a slacker in this family. If you don't work, you better keep the house in order and cook dinner." "I'm not your housekeeper or cook," snapped at Jasmine. "I'm not going to ruin my manicure and hands by scrubbing your floors." Donna looked questioningly at her son, then at her daughter-in-law. "What did you get married for?" Donna asked. "It is the husband's duty to provide for his wife." "And what is the wife's duty?" Austin's mother asked. The mother-in-law's question stumped Jasmine. She shifted her gaze from her husband to her mother-in-law and tried in vain to find the right words. Finally, the girl gathered her thoughts and answered, "It is the wife's duty to bear and bring up children." "Good," said Donna, "and who will feed and wash them?" "There should be a housekeeper for that," reasoned Jasmine. "In case you haven't noticed, we don't have a housekeeper," replied her mother-in-law. "I've been doing the housework myself so far. I think I can still make myself a bowl of soup and iron a dress, but I won't take care of my son anymore. He has a wife now. If you hire a housekeeper, I won't mind, but you'll have to pay for it yourself." After dinner, Donna washed the dishes and went to her room, leaving the newlyweds alone. "I don't think your mother likes me," Jasmine concluded. "She's always trying to embarrass me in front of you." "Don't make it up." Austin stood up for his mother. "It's just that she wants to keep you busy." "I see. I don't think we're going to get along in this house together. We should give her a hint about moving out. Why don't you talk to your mother?" "Talking to her wouldn't be a problem," Austin said. "I just don't want you and me to have to look for an apartment." "Long sleep, son," remarked Donna, putting on her jacket and heading for the exit. "You're leaving already?" Austin clarified. "Aren't you going to wait for me?" "I warned you, I don't like it when employees are late, and I'm never late myself," her mother replied and disappeared out the door. Austin, disgruntled, wandered into the kitchen. The table was empty, and there was nothing in the refrigerator that looked like a cooked breakfast. Deciding to grab a snack on his way to work, he slammed the refrigerator door shut and went to his room. His spouse was sleeping like a baby. Austin looked in the closet and found no iron shirt. "Jasmine," he called to his wife quietly, "iron my shirt." The girl only rolled over to the other side. "Jasmine," he repeated louder, "I have nothing to go to work in." The wife opened her eyes, stretched, and replied with a smile, "Then don't go." She reached out her arms to her husband and pulled him into bed, wrapping him in her arms. Austin didn't resist much. He liked it when Jasmine was gentle and affectionate with him. After lying in bed with his wife, Austin looked at his watch and realized that he was finally late for work. "That's great," he said, getting out of bed, "but Mom won't like my absences. I could end up unemployed." "Oh, come on." Jasmine grinned, "Grumbles and will return. She won't kick out her only son." "You don't know my mother well. You're just like a little delinquent child," laughed Jasmine. "Maybe we'd better go out? You've completely stopped taking me to restaurants. I explained everything to you. We have no money now." After these words, the girl became furious. "I don't want to hear it. I married a millionaire and he turned out to be a starving man. Either you talk to your mother today and dot all the I's and dot all the I's, or," Jasmine paused to think of the second option, "or I'll have to do it." Austin didn't show up for work until lunchtime. The principal immediately called him into her office. It was clear from her stern look and stern tone that there was no good news. When she was alone with her son, she said, "You asked to work for me. I kindly agreed, brought you to the enterprise, explained all the procedures, but you decided they didn't concern you. If you change your mind, I won't hold you back. Just write your notice and go." Austin assumed that this was the format of their conversation, so he prepared himself morally. "My man," he said to her in a calm voice, "let's not be too hasty. I'm your only heir, so sooner or later you'll have to hand over the reins to me. Why all this circus with a simple laborer, then a foreman, and so on? Everyone should be in their place. I didn't go to university so I can work as a laborer. If it weren't for these, as you say, simple laborers, you wouldn't be living in a huge house now and eating caviar sandwiches." Speaking of sandwiches, Austin caught on. "I'm late today because I spent a long time making breakfast and ironing my shirt." Why doesn't your wife cook and iron for you? I thought you said the husband was the provider and the wife the keeper. Jasmine does not feel like a mistress in our house, complained Austin, and I can understand that. You can't have two mistresses in the same kitchen. I agree. So think about a separate place to live. That way, maybe your Jasmine will be a better hostess sooner. Austin realized that the conversation was not going the way he wanted it to, so he decided to leave. His mother stopped him on the doorstep. And think about the job. And for today's absenteeism, I will deduct from your salary. Only when he left the principal's office, Austin gave vent to his feelings. What a mother. When I was a kid, she was at work 24 hours a day, and now she's taking over my upbringing. It's too late for that. We'll see who'll be the first to come begging for help. You're not getting any younger. He turned to her in his heart. And you're not taking your business with you. And when you're having a hard time coping, you'll call me yourself. Are you all right? A familiar voice pulled him out of his thoughts. Austin looked up and saw Louise in front of him. She was walking toward the principal with a stack of file folders. The girl looked at him as if he were a stranger. Not a single muscle on her face trembled. Austin even thought that she might not have recognized him. Louise? You look good. He perked up. How are you? Thank you. The girl replied calmly. I'm doing fine. And you? I thought you looked upset. You seemed upset. Well, okay. She shrugged her shoulders and continued on her way. Wait, Austin called out to her. Why don't we meet tonight? We can sit and talk. No, Louise said firmly. I don't date married men. And there's nothing to talk about. Without waiting for the former suitor's answer, the girl went to the principal's office. Austin stood and watched her. Miniature, as if chiseled by the hand of a master, elegantly dressed, in expensive stiletto shoes, she walked down the corridor, swaying her hips. The young man could not take his eyes off her. As if mesmerized, he looked at her and remembered the nights he had spent with her. Pretty girl, on an exhalation said an unfamiliar male voice behind him. I can't take my eyes off her. Austin looked at the man in his work uniform with disdain and replied, Nothing much. And to close the subject, added, and you go where you're going. Married life was getting more and more stressful for Austin. This was not how he had envisioned it. Jasmine was always demanding money, and his mother wouldn't give him a penny on principle. Previously, Austin's salary was enough for fun and partying. All other expenses were completely on his mother. Now he had to support himself and his wife. And as it turned out, his salary was not enough for all that. Austin, since we moved in, you've stopped spending time with me, my wife complained. Why don't we go to a club tonight? Jasmine, what club? I work from morning till night, and I barely have enough money to make ends meet. How long are you going to be your mother's apprentice? Asked the disgruntled wife. You can't make a deal with your own mother. I already have. Austin replied with irritation in his voice. You couldn't live in her house on your own, so we moved out. You can forget about clubs and restaurants now. All set. Jasmine was indignant. Your mother showed us from the very beginning that we are unnecessary. She was trying to get us to move into a rented apartment. If you'd done anything around the house, none of this would have happened. So it's all my fault? Well, I'm sorry. You should have told me you didn't want a wife, but a housekeeper. I've never held a rag or a frying pan since I was a kid. And you thought that if I married you, I'd become a cook and a cleaner. Wrong, hubby. If you can't earn a decent living for your wife, that's your problem, and you don't need to put it on your head. Letting out her anger, Jasmine immediately made a cute face, stretched her lips, and slammed her long eyelashes. Well, darling, why don't you ask your mother for money? Darling, Austin answered in her tone of voice. Don't you want to help me solve our problems? How? Like getting a job, he suggested. Oh, really? Are you kidding? What will my friends say? The girl said she was scared. They'll laugh at me. What's so funny about working? Only losers and peasants work. Do you think my mother and I are losers? Was your father, who made $1 million, a loser or a villain? Her husband's example stumped Jasmine, but she quickly thought of something to answer. My father is an exception, and you're a loser. Couldn't agree with your mother on the basics. Now you're just a coward to her. I have a feeling this conversation isn't going to get us anywhere, Austin concluded. Whether you like it or not, you're going to have to learn how to run a household. I don't have a single fresh shirt left. The refrigerator is empty. There's a thick layer of dust on the furniture and on the floor. I can't go on like this. Yes, I agree. I don't want to live in filth. I'm sick of eating your scrambled eggs and store-bought dumplings. I'm going to my mom's. When you get rich, call me. Jessamine gathered her things and left, slamming the door loudly. Austin didn't hold her back, figuring that without her, it would be easier for him to go back to his mother's house and maybe get her to make him his deputy. And he had miscalculated. Donna, after listening to her son's sob story about his wife leaving him, decided to give him a second chance. She trusted him to run the business for the duration of her business trip. Donna had been planning to open a branch in another city for years. Now she was on her way to take care of it locally. She left Louise to look after Austin. The girl had studied the details of production during her work, and now she could understand all the nuances as well as the owner of the enterprise. Sometimes Donna would say in her heart of hearts, "I wish you were my daughter. You and I would have broken mountains together." After his mother's departure, Austin returned to her home and the same day did not fail to tell the news to his wife. Jessamine had been living in her parents' house for a few days, but did not know how to move out. Her mother brought another Alfonso Lubovnik with whom she squandered the rest of her husband's fortune. She gradually sold off expensive furniture, her jewelry, and talked about selling the car and the house. To her daughter's unhappy reproaches, she answered the same thing. "You first lived with your husband as many years as I lived. Make him earn the same fortune as your father earned, and then dispose of it." When she learned of the change in Austin's life, Jessamine rushed to him the same day. "We must take advantage of the situation," she instructed her husband. "Now that you have access to your mother's money, you can transfer a small amount from the company account to your own account, which will be enough for us at first. And gradually you will gain her trust and take over the reins." "Do you think it's so easy to withdraw money from the company's account?" Austin doubted his wife's words. "I'm sure it won't be that easy for you," she replied. "You're a smart, educated man, and who would notice a small amount of money in such a huge enterprise? Besides, no one will dare say anything to you. You are the son of the owner, and therefore the future director." Austin didn't like his wife's idea, but she had a good point. Of course, he was entitled to his mother's money, and there might never be a better opportunity. After a little thought, the man decided to act. He realized that the old employees who had worked at the company since its founding, he did not help him. But among the newcomers, there was a young man, arrogant for the reward. After a few days, Austin and his wife could afford to hire a housekeeper, make a few new clothes, even pay off the debt to his mother Jessamine. Now they could go to clubs and dine in restaurants. To Louise's questions, Austin answered in a commanding voice, "Don't poke your nose where it doesn't belong. This is my mother's business, which means it's mine." "I think Donna should know about it," the assistant said. "She knows," the young man assured her. "And you're just jealous. You didn't want to meet me, and now you're biting your elbows. But I'm not vindictive. My offer still stands. Why don't we have dinner tonight?" "I don't think your wife would like that," Louise replied. "I don't think she's expecting me for dinner." Every day, Austin became more and more into the role of the boss. He spoke disrespectfully and in a commanding tone to his subordinates, was late for work, or even didn't show up at all. He constantly needed money for his beautiful life, and now he knew where to get it. Austin and Jessamine never denied themselves anything, but the beautiful life of the newlyweds did not last long. Donna soon found out about the shenanigans of her son and daughter-in-law. The business trip had to be interrupted early and returned to the city. "Man," Austin was surprised to see his mother on the doorstep. "What are you doing here?" "Living," she answered dryly. "But you must be on a business trip." The young man still couldn't believe his eyes. "I should be," Donna confirmed, picking up her suitcase. "And you're supposed to be at work, shouldn't you?" Austin glanced at his watch and remained silent. Just then, Jesmine's voice came from upstairs. "Austin, well, how long do you have to wait? I'm going to die of thirst." "Jessamine, my mom is here," Austin told his wife. 2 minutes later, his sister-in-law was already coming down the stairs to the living room. "Donna, you're back already?" she asked in an oily voice. "We weren't expecting you so early." "You mean you haven't had time to spend all my money?" she said sternly. "I don't know what you're talking about," Jessamine retorted. "Austin is at work day and night. I hardly see him." From today, Austin will be at your complete disposal, the woman replied and turned to her son. You no longer work at the company. While Austin and Jessamine, dumbfounded by the arrival of their landlady, stood looking at each other, Donna dragged her suitcase to the second floor and disappeared into her room. But a moment later, she came out of her room and said, "And have the house cleared out by tonight. Mother, this is my house too. Don't forget, I'm your own son." Austin resented her. "You can't kick me out every time. The deed is mine, but you're not my son anymore. I will not tolerate traitors in my house. I've worked my whole life to make sure you had nothing. I gave you a great education. And how did you take advantage of all that? Steal from me? And then you have the nerve to tell me you're my son. Take your slacker wife and get out of my house. And if you dare disobey me, I'll file a police report on you." After the scandal, Donna locked herself in her room. Trying to distract herself from her heavy thoughts, she unpacked her suitcase, took a hot bath, and went to the company. The employees greeted her happily. "Donna, I apologize for having to distract you from important negotiations," Louisa said upon meeting her. "But don't apologize." The director interrupted her. "You did the right thing. A little more and my negotiations would have become irrelevant." At that time, the chief accountant came into the director's office. "Come in, Emerald." Donna invited her in. "And you stay," she said to Louise. The girl remained standing where she was. The chief accountant went to the director's desk and put down a folder of papers. "Here is the expense report for the entire period of your absence." Donna looked through the papers carefully and only after studying them to the end asked, "Who helped him?" "Darren," Emerald replied. "When I went on sick leave as you instructed, he stayed on for me. Austin promised him a generous reward. Of course, all the operations were not done without my knowledge and strictly out of the money you left behind." "I see," Donna said without hiding her disappointment. It was a pity that Austin had chosen to use the opportunity to prove himself as a leader. But I'd rather find out now that he's not capable of replacing me than have him ruin my business later. "Donna, did you arrange this trip on purpose?" Louise asked. "Did you know about it before I called?" "It was a real and very successful business trip," the director replied. "But I didn't immediately decide to entrust my son with the management of the company. I realized that he was inexperienced in this business, and I wanted to see how he would deal with the issues that arose, who he would consult, and whether he would do anything at all. On Emerald's advice, I set aside a small amount of money for contingencies. Of course, Austin didn't know anything. It was a test," Donna sighed and added with bitterness in her voice, "and he didn't pass it." For several days, the principal looked depressed and preoccupied. She was silent most of the time. When she was alone with her thoughts, she sighed often. Louise tried to stay close to her. She genuinely felt sorry for Donna. It had been a long time since they had met, and she had become a close person to the sisters. Now that the woman was alone, they supported her, for which Donna was grateful to the girls. 10 years had passed. The relationship between mother and son could hardly be called kinship. Austin lived in a rented apartment and worked in a small office in his specialty. With his wife he had long since divorced, Jessamine found a better candidate. They never had children. Louise had been married for several years and was raising a daughter. Martha graduated from high school and went to college. Donna supported the girls in everything. Over the years they had, indeed, become family. One day the director called Louisa into her office and said, "I've decided to pass my brainchild on to you. You are the only one who will be able to carry on my work with dignity." "And you? Are you going somewhere?" "No, I'll be around. And if you need me, I'll help you. But I'm getting restless." "What about Austin?" she asked uncertainly. "He's your son." "Austin is my son by blood, nothing more. You and Martha are my daughters in spirit, and you are more dear to me. I know I can rely on you. Unfortunately for me, I never got to be a mom to Austin." "Don, everyone makes mistakes." Louise tried to stick up for him. "I'm sure he's regretted it many times over. If he had, he'd come and apologize. But he still thinks he's wronged, and I have no desire to prove anything to him." Soon, Louise became director of the company. A year later, Donna died. It turned out she'd been ill for a long time, but she'd never told anyone. Austin, after the funeral, moved into his mother's house, but his joy was short-lived. Donna bequeathed the house to Louise and bought her son a spacious apartment. In addition, she opened a bank account in Austin's name, from which he could withdraw a certain amount each month. What a mother! The man cursed heartily when he heard about his parents' will. Leave everything to some housekeeper, and the son has to live in poverty. The housekeeper has done more for her than her own son. He heard a girl's voice from behind him. Martha looked at Austin with contempt and left the notary's office.
The wife reluctantly packed her things to leave her husband. But hearing the voices of her husband and mother-in-law, she hid. Carol sat in the stall at her workplace and fell asleep due to the change in weather. She wanted to sleep all the time. The bell rang and a customer appeared near the window. "A scone, please, and 2 poppy seed muffins," the man asked. Carol handed him the purchases and sat back in her seat. Despite such a simple job, she would rather have something physical than sit like this all day, pecking her nose. The customers were good in the morning and from 3 o'clock on, but the rest of the time the woman entertained herself with embroidery or reading books. Carol remembered the 5 years of hard study she had spent at the institute. And now, years later, it turned out that higher education had no meaning for her. After studying, the girl went to work as an engineer at a factory. It closed after 3 years. Carol was disappointed in her future for several years and realized that only in big cities education mattered. The provinces only needed teachers, and for jobs that were distributed in advance to family and friends. Carol didn't stop there. She tried a change of specialty. She finished courses and became a landscape designer. During that period, she met her husband, Daniel. She had high hopes then, which again were not realized. There were few people in the city who were willing to pay specialists to design landscaping projects for plots and gardens. The company promised Carol that they would have projects from the city and possibly the regional administration. But time passed, and apart from the occasional order, nothing happened. Carol urged Daniel to go with her to the regional city, but her fiancé was strongly attached to his parents and didn't want to live in the city. So at almost 32, it seemed to Carol that her life was over. Yes, she married Daniel. They sold Carol's grandmother's old house, added the money given to them as a wedding gift, and took out a loan in her husband's name, as Carol had no official job at the time. Carol's husband did not have a college degree and did not particularly aspire to one. He worked in a warehouse where his mother had gotten him a job many years ago through her connections. Carol tried many things. She even worked at school. But since the girl was adamantly opposed to the system that killed children in schools, she didn't last long there. If someone had told me that I would just waste 5 years of my life, she sighed and put the book aside, I wouldn't have studied anywhere at all. You can learn everything online now. As a child, Carol loved inventing things. Her father taught high school drafting and her mother worked as a doctor. Her parents decided that engineering education would suit Carol, and the girl herself entered the institute with high hopes. Carol dreamed of getting some experience and entering graduate school in a big city, but she quickly had to come back down to earth. She didn't want to stay to teach at the institute. She was interested in practicing. But her parents didn't have the money for her to go where the research centers were located, and counting on a grant at her own institute was pointless because of the low salaries of teachers for many years. In the end, never having become an inventor, she sat in a stall and did not understand what to do next. After a 15 job at the store, Carol found a rather promising place. Of course, the salary wasn't great, but the 8 to 4 schedule with Sunday off suited her. Carol, hi, came from the other side of the window. How are you doing? Why are you so sad? Hi, Kyle, she sighed. What's there to be happy about? I'll probably never get out of this hole. But it depends on how you look at it, Carol's former classmate replied seriously. The glass is half full or empty. That's something only you can determine. Sometimes Carol envied Kyle. He was a head saint in high school too. His family was very poor. His alcoholic father had drained his mother until he died. And in 11th grade, the kid's mother fell and was left disabled. Kyle's 2 older sisters left for more promising places, and he stayed to look after Elena Alexeyevna. Kyle, like a mom, thoughtfully asked Carol, "Take her a visitor." "You will." "Thank you." He took his bread and a small package from Carol. "Let's keep our spirits up, or you'll find happiness around the corner and you won't be ready for it." I wish to God I could say that, sighed her classmate. "I'll probably be carried out of this stall." The meeting with Constantine upset Carol even more, and beat, and so forever. But even earlier, Carol decided for the umpteenth time to talk to her husband today. She was sure he wouldn't agree to move from here to somewhere else. Still, the woman decided to give it a try. "What do I want?" she asked herself aloud. "But I'll start with a simple one. Do I want a lot of money?" Unequivocally, no. I want enough so that I don't have to think about not having a penny for bread in a week. I do not need an expensive car or a palace in principle. I need money as a tool for living, not for power and manipulating others. Let's move on. Family. I want children madly. I don't think there's any point in dragging it out any longer. Daniel and I have been married for about 5 years now. We've had enough to live for ourselves. The more Carol reasoned, the more she felt that her problem wasn't even the job. It was a matter of fulfillment. She was suffering from the fact that she couldn't find herself on the outside. Carol saw that she was not living her life. She wasn't realizing her potential at all. "It's your own fault," her mother-in-law often reprimanded her. "If you'd worked at school, everything would have been fine. But no, everyone's happy, but you're not. You're special." Carol put the book aside and surfed the internet again. She loved videos about cold core, single crystal synthesis, and other things that were recognized as pseudoscience. Although it had been proven more than once that it all worked in practice, people's consciousness hadn't yet reached those types of energy. If only we had such a device, we wouldn't need to build dangerous nuclear power plants. A little box in every yard and everyone would have electricity, Carol whispered, and began to draw something on the paper. "Give me 2 bottles of Budweiser beer." Carol's slightly gruff voice brought Carol back to her senses. She handed over the bread, smiled crookedly. She didn't feel like saying anything back when the bread was already cheaper. The man didn't wait for the saleswoman's reaction and went into action himself. "You've got a nerve, all their own. And bread costs as much as abroad." Carol shrugged her shoulders. She didn't want to get into a discussion. She couldn't influence the pricing in any way. And it was not only pointless, but even dangerous to take all the blame. The customer left, but Carol's mood had completely soured. She started to go home. It was an hour before the stall closed. Carol felt sad again. She dialed her husband. "Hi, how are you doing?" she asked Daniel. "Will you be there today as usual?" "No, I'll be late, maybe a couple hours," he sighed. "There's a shipment coming in late today, and we have to take it in." Carol wasn't in much of a mood to go home. Everything was boring. If she could get away from this life, she'd do it. Tangled in her coat. Despite the wind, she still decided to walk. The beginning of April was cold. There was still snow in some places. Carol walked toward the river. Her hands were cold, but for some reason she was drawn there. The woman approached the bank. Carol suddenly shuddered. "Are you doing something?" Glaring at him with her eyes. "Thinking," he answered calmly. "See," he pointed with his hand at the ice. "Why does it float?" "Well, because water expands when it freezes and becomes lighter." Carol answered at once. "Why does it expand?" He sighed. "No one knows. No one has been able to see how water molecules rearrange themselves into a crystalline structure. Just a moment, and the water in front of us is no longer water, but ice." "Is this a matter of life and death for you?" Carol tried to make a joke. "Yes," Kyle answered seriously. "I've been working on an invention for several years now. I want to create a substance that would restore the structure of Mom's hip bone." "What does ice have to do with it?" Carol couldn't understand. "You want to put it on the sore spot?" "No, I want a liquid that can expand when it hits the bone tissue, and thus create a porous bone structure. After my mom's fracture, all of her bones are flattened." Honestly, I can't even imagine how that would be possible, Carol thought. If you inject this fluid into the muscle, the body temperature will prevent it from changing structure. Therefore, this fluid in its original state must exist at a higher temperature. His eyes lit up. "I've already gotten it, but I don't have time to inject it yet. It's already getting viscous in the syringe." "You amaze me," Carol whispered in amazement. but I still don't understand how it can be done. The idea is this: I inject a certain substance, and at body temperature it becomes viscous and expands. I need to inject it near the problem bone. Then this substance will lift the bone tissue a little bit and keep it that way for a certain period of time. The bone tissue regenerates quickly and a new healthy area appears. About a week to 2 weeks later, the substance breaks down into water and other safe elements. But if you look at it all theoretically, Carol lit up, then you need an inhibitor to slow down the solidification of this substance ahead of time. Although I still don't believe it can be done. The conversation with Kyle was a real jolt to the woman. What Kyle was doing seemed more miraculous than real to her. But let's say such a substance existed and could be administered. She pondered on the way home. How would it determine that it needed to work on bone and not other tissue? Carol got home and began to do her chores. But Kyle and his idea never left her mind. She was grasping at it like a straw, you might say. It had been so long since Carol's mind had solved such complex problems that the woman had taken a keen interest in the whole thing. Late in the afternoon, her husband returned. Carol's eyes were burning. She wanted to tell him everything. "Daniel, do you remember my classmate Kyle?" She spoke quickly. "Well, he's doing something so interesting right now. He wants to invent a drug to cure his mother." What a load of crap. Daniel made a disgruntled face. He's had her for over 10 years with a fractured femoral neck. People can't get up. She's gonna die, you idiot. Why is he an idiot? The wife took offense. Maybe he can do something. Many inventions were created by amateurs, not professionals. Because he's an idiot. The man said unkindly, "I've seen your Kyle. It's written all over his face that he's a worthless man." "I don't agree with you," the wife countered. "Kyle doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he works. He's a decent man." "He's lazy." Daniel waved his hand. "Don't spoil the mood. I don't want to talk about this garbage." Daniel sat down at the table. Not that Daniel was any different from anyone else, but in his mind he was a real man. Of course, everyone in the neighborhood knew that Kyle was taking care of his mother. Many people found such things surprising, but didn't like it. Daniel himself had also lived across town with his mother before he got married. Carol and Daniel were able to buy a home inexpensively in this area of town that was considered the most up and coming. "Daniel, let's go somewhere else." Carol couldn't take it anymore. "I can't live here anymore." "I'm not leaving my mother, I warned you right away," he replied. "Maybe she'll move in with us later too." Carol tried again. "No, she wants to stay here." And Carol, "Well, don't you start. Go to work at the school, and your ardor will diminish immediately." In the beginning of their acquaintance, Carol felt like she was behind Daniel like a stone wall. But after a few years, she began to notice that her husband was not inclined to talk openly or to change. He was a very closed, conservative man, even though he didn't realize it. Carol suffered greatly from this. She could be called sociable, and at first the girl was sure that she could find a common language with Daniel. But time showed that she wouldn't. "Okay, Daniel, if you don't want to leave here, then let's plan a baby. Where else can we wait?" she raged. "That's something you and I will discuss later," he replied coldly. "Carol, will you let me have a quiet evening? I'm tired." There was nothing left for Carol to do but forget everything and do some business. How often do young people fall in love? They think their love will last forever. But time passes, and both begin to notice that they have not chosen the most suitable partner. And it becomes scary. Why is it so? Everything was great in the beginning. Unfortunately, each of us enters marriage not with a real person, but with our own expectations. So when our expectations are not met, we begin to see our partner as he or she really is. And of course, the reality is very different from the desired reality. Someone begins to work on himself, and the relationship improves, or people break up. But such a minority. The rest try their best to maintain the standards imposed on them and go on with their lives. That's what Carol thought, that now she would have to die with Daniel on the same day. Carol went to sleep again, such an impenetrable darkness enveloping her. She cast a glance at her husband and shuddered. He seemed foreign and distant to her. The next day was warmer. Carol didn't even turn on the heater. It began as it always did, first the receiving of goods, and then the customers crowded around her stall. Carol tried to smile at them, but she wasn't in the mood. She saw a picture in front of her that she had taken a wrong turn. Her parents didn't get involved in her daughter's life, and she couldn't talk to them. They, too, held views that were considered normal in society. By the end of the day, Carol realized that she was dying to talk to Kyle. But he was coming in every other day for bread. He wasn't officially working anywhere. He couldn't leave his mother all day. He worked part-time, did odd jobs, hired out to neighbors. None of his older sisters wanted to take on such a burden. So the man got by as best he could. The phone rang. Daniel said he was staying at his mother's house tonight. Carol knew the routine very well. Daniel had a difficult temper. He couldn't calm down for a long time, so after such conversations with his wife, he often spent the night at his mother's house, so as not to bring the matter to conflict. Perhaps it was Carol's own fault. If she caught fire, she couldn't stop until she got some result. And since it seemed to the woman that her happiness depended on moving to another city, or having a baby, she wanted to see this through to the end. "All right," the wife replied through tears. "Daniel," she wanted to say something to him, but refrained. "I'll miss you." It had been a lonely evening. It drove Carol further into a state of hopelessness. She felt like tearing up and throwing up. Maybe get a job in the area. An idea came to her mind. I won't be able to take it anytime soon. Daniel will never leave his mother. Daniel's father had died a year and a half ago. Now he was all the more reluctant to even think about another city. He was fine here. His mother was alone and needed looking after. Only unlike Kyle, Daniel felt like he was acting like a grown man. "I'm doing something wrong," Carol sighed. "It's like I'm walking in a vicious circle. There's no way out." It seemed she saw a dead end in every area of her life. The only thing that occurred to her then was to take a few days off for a few days off for a few days and just not think about anything. The next day was Friday, and the woman called the landlord first thing in the morning. He agreed to give her a couple days. Carol rejoiced when she saw her classmate. "But how are you doing? How are your experiments going?" "Well, some things are," he reported cheerfully. "Honestly, there isn't enough time." "I'd so like to see it," Carol admitted. "I can't believe it's possible. How does this substance reach the bone?" "Hey, I certainly don't understand it myself," the man shrugged. "It's just that if it stays in the tissue, it starts breaking down right away. I did experiments on my dog. Rex ran outside one night. He was mauled by other dogs. After some time, I tried to inject him near the sore spot, but there was no result. He healed all by himself." "Then why do you think it works on bone tissue?" The classmate couldn't figure it out. "And that's where the same Rex helped me again," laughed the man. "Only now that restless dog was being pounded by someone. Anyway, he came back with a broken paw. I gave him shots, didn't even think anything would work. But to my surprise, after 3 days he could walk. I touched his leg and the bone had fused. I gave him another injection. And within a week he was running like before. I don't have lab equipment, so I can't tell you exactly how it all works. But right now it seems to me that this substance first expands the bone tissue and then absorbs into it, promoting regeneration. You want to come over and I'll show you?" Kyle offered and started to pay because a couple more people came up behind him. "Are you going to be home tomorrow?" Carol shouted out from the stall. Kyle nodded affirmatively and waved at her. "Despite the problems, I find Kyle's life much more interesting than mine." Carol sighed and began serving customers. And there was something about it all. Perhaps Carol's passion for scientific knowledge, an interest in learning something new. But she did go to Kyle's house the next day. Carol talked to her classmate's mother. She had seen her years ago, and it was obvious now how much the woman was suffering. Kyle dressed her, taking her for a walk outside. "So, shall we go see it?" He winked cheerfully at his guest. "I'll warn you right away, my place is a mess." They entered the workshop. Yes, it was a place of sheer chaos, but it made Carol's blood boil. How happy was she to see all those scattered tools, flasks, coasters, checks, bits of different metals. Wow, her eyes lit up. "Kyle, you've got a real lab in here. I'm the one with the mess right now. And when I start the process, it's sterile clean here on the table." The man led her over to a very strange setup. There were some tubes connected there, vessels through which some kind of gas was apparently being pumped. And how does all this work, she asked in amazement. Is it something organic? Well, of course, no hydrocarbons around here. Kyle smiled and began to explain to Carol how his device worked. But that was only the first part. The main part was the substance it produced. That was where all the value was. Have you tried injecting your mom with it yet? Carol asked cautiously. Carol was afraid. I'm scared too, he sighed. He had recently picked up 2 stray dogs with broken paws. So now I'm treating them. Wow, caught her guest's breath. It's working. She kept her eyes on her host. Yes, he sighed. But I want to add one more component. My intuition tells me the effectiveness might increase that way. Kyle, have you told your mom about your experiments? Carol inquired. She wants to try it, he replied seriously. Mom is already very tired of her disability. I feel very sorry for her, too. Yes, the case is too delicate. There are great risks. Little chance of anything? Maybe such a drug would work for dogs, but not for humans, sighed a classmate. That's the problem, Kyle supported her. It's not like I'm a scientist. I don't have that kind of knowledge. Sure, I've reread tons of books, even consulted with some experts. But I can't say out loud that it works. Kyle. Well, if it does work, what then? Curiosity was shared by Carol. But I'm not Henry Ford. I don't have a wife, Clara, who supported him no matter what. And the light saw the world's first automobile, the man sighed. But if it does come out that way, I'll be happy for those people who will have the opportunity to have real bones instead of titanium bones. So what? A lot of handicapped people will walk normally. Carol walked home. She wanted to cry and rejoice at the same time. Why cry? Because people like Kyle never asked for anything from anyone. They were altruistic and tried to bring something to people at the expense of themselves. Well, joy was a natural feeling from the fact that among the heart-centered people were these fools like her classmate. Daniel and his kind would never put such simpletons in line with themselves. It would be beneath their dignity. But it was Kyle, not him, who sought to improve the lives of all mankind. He used his last dime to buy the necessary drugs, assembling rig after rig until he got exactly what he wanted. These are the kind of people who just move science forward. They're real men with pumped-up brains, not bodies. The latter didn't matter much, except for the physical labor. There were many, many things going through Carol's mind. She, too, wanted to quit everything and do something, to invest her energies, to dream that something would work out, instead of sitting in her stall and being angry at life. Carol was in no mood at all, so she didn't call her husband. She felt a strong resentment toward him. Compared to Kyle, he looked retarded. His outlook on life showed that he didn't have much intelligence in him. She distracted herself with household chores. Her husband came home from work in the evening. He was kind of wooden. Daniel, is something wrong? His wife walked up to him. You look exhausted. Yeah, there was trouble at work today, he tossed off and went into the other room. Carol didn't bother to bother him, but there was pain in her soul again. Daniel seemed like a complete stranger to her. The weekend flew by quickly and Carol went back to work. The morning didn't go well. First, some grandfather got into a fight with her, always telling her that she'd stolen from him. In his opinion, she should have taken half as much bread from him. Grandpa, do I have to add the rest of you out of my own pocket? Carol answered him. You're smoking everyone here, yelled an old man outside the stall. Whatever price you want, that's what you charge. Old age is no fun, said an elderly woman nearby. It takes away everything, even your mind. The grandfather kept yelling, threatening to report him to the police when the saleswoman stopped paying attention to him. Hello, Carol, the longtime acquaintance approached the stall with a wry smile. She had no idea how much Carol hated her, and the feeling was mutual. Hello, Lucy. The woman replied calmly. You, as always, she did not want to prolong the conversation. She and Lucy had once worked together at the school. The latter stayed there, worked her way up to head teacher, and thought she had become a celestial. Well, since Carol was openly opposed to the school system, she was laughed at by the likes of Lucy. They made a good profit at the school, with some of the curtain money going into their pockets. And the rates for expensive gifts were set at the beginning of the school year. I heard you and Daniel divorced. Lucy lowered her voice. Why? Were they so out of character? What the hell is that? Carol's eyes flashed. We're fine, we're still together. But that chick he keeps driving around in his car is nothing like you. Lucy laughed out loud. I heard it was someone from his work. It's not like his mom gave him a girl. Is there anything else you need? Or is that it? Carol tossed it to her. Sorry, I got a lot of work to do. Yeah, she said dismissively. The truth hurts. She grabbed the bag of muffins and walked away. Of course, Lucy's words had hurt Carol. She trusted her husband. Yes, he was occasionally late for work, but that didn't mean anything. Idiot, Carol whispered. You'd better look at yourself, stolen money. Daddy's pockets are howling. No matter how much Carol urged herself not to think about the incident, all sorts of thoughts popped into her head. Meanwhile, Daniel was having a serious conversation. It was break time, and he went into the back room to see Lenora. The woman pretended not to pay attention to him. Daniel approached her, wanting to hug her. Don't touch me. She waved him away. I told you it's over between us. Len, stop it. I love you, he said in a gentle voice. I broke up with my ex, she sobbed. Are you still living with her? I just don't know how to file for divorce so that I can get the house back. I paid the loan on it, the man sighed. You wouldn't even listen to me yesterday, Lenora said. I don't care, the mistress didn't want to reconcile. You promised me that she wouldn't be in my life anymore. She sobbed. I can tell you that again, he confirmed. You give me time. When Daniel had met Carol, he'd thought he'd found his ideal. The girl seemed smart, reliable. Of course, the young man had serious relationships before her, but he had not yet decided to marry. Daniel always considered himself one of the most real men. When he was young, he enthusiastically pumped his muscles. In his opinion, he wasn't stupid either. In short, the perfect man. After a year of married life, Carol and her high-mindedness began to annoy him. Daniel didn't want to waste his time with such nonsense. All this talk about life, about how to make it better for everyone. It wasn't for him. Well, and then, about 3 years later, when Carol had developed a bent on moving to the city, the young man finally realized that he'd done something wrong. It wasn't Daniel's policy to admit his mistakes. A real man couldn't make mistakes. But a couple more months passed, and Daniel clearly realized that something had to be done. He'd had his eye on one at work a long time ago. Lenora was living with Wade at the time. She was a beautiful and hard-working woman, so Daniel began to pursue her. They hid at first. Daniel had a car, so it was easy. Then Daniel started making jealous scenes to get his lover to break up with her roommate. Basically nothing new. A word or two about Daniel's mother. It's not that Tracy hated Carol. No, it's just that she'd always felt she was the wrong kind of wife for Daniel. Carol wasn't exactly a looker. Her overly skinny body and salt black hair didn't evoke the emotions that usually came from seeing a beautiful woman. And when Tracy learned that her son was looking at Lenora, she didn't mind at all. Carol's fate had been decided behind her back. She'd hoped she and her husband would go to the big city and have children. Lenora clung to her lover, wanting certainty. And for that, Daniel had to go through with the divorce. The sooner the better. The man himself couldn't stand his wife anymore either. She had become repugnant to him. Daniel, in the evening, Carol came up to him and said, I want to talk to you. She was very worried. Not tonight, he objected immediately. Carol, may I? Did you get any sleep tonight? I still can't get over last night. Daniel. I can't take it anymore, she shouted. You're not paying attention to me. What's the matter? It's nothing, he threw coldly. I'm tired. It's not like I'm a robot. I can't take a day off on a whim like you do. Do you love me? The wife asked provocatively. Carol, answer me. Did you decide to finish me off today? After all, jumped the husband out of bed and began to dress. Where are you going? Carol rushed to him in tears. To my mother's, at least to sleep at her place. She doesn't nag me as much as you do. He said goodbye and disappeared into the yard. During the night, Carol was restless. The next day in the evening, she decided to drive to her husband's work. She waited till morning. It was gray, unkind. The work was hard. There weren't many people because it was raining. Carol closed her stall and hailed a cab. She tangled herself in her raincoat and waited. Daniel worked until 6. His wife waited for him, stood nearby and watched as her husband came out of the gate, followed by some strange woman. She sat in the front seat and began kissing him passionately. Carol couldn't move. She sat down and cried loudly. The car had long since left and she still couldn't get up. Daniel, she called her husband an hour later. We need to have a serious talk with you. I've seen you. So stop making a fool of me. Her husband was silent, disconnecting the phone. Carol tried many more times to dial him, but he blocked her number. Bastard, Carol screamed. What a coward you turned out to be. You've never been a real man, only lip service, just shaking your muscles senselessly. Carol was exhausted that night. She hadn't slept much the night before to do anything about it. She took a sedative, fell asleep. She woke up to the phone ringing, her alarm clock going off. She could barely get up. No sooner had she opened her stall than Kyle came rushing toward her on his bike. He looked very excited. Carol, I did it, he said. I gave Mom her first shot, and she's feeling better. Congratulations, she said dryly. She was in so much pain she didn't want to see anyone. Did something happen to you? Carol's classmate tossed his bike. It's nothing much, she said through tears. It's just that I'm going to be filing for divorce. Did you and Daniel have a fight? As if he wanted to be supportive of his friend. Carol, I can help you with that. Kyle? With what? She covered her face with her hands. Will you make me forget that he has a mistress and that he cheated on me? Here you go, give this to your mom. She held out some buns in a bag. Come over tonight after work, Kyle suggested. You need a detached look at all this. Carol didn't say anything back to him, shrugging her shoulders. She just wanted to stop living at that moment. Daniel still didn't answer either. Carol called her parents, explaining everything to them. Carol, get your things and come and visit us, her mother told her immediately. How I didn't want your Daniel. He thought too highly of himself. And so he was. Not a man, but a wimp. Can't even admit his betrayal. And Daniel was actually very nervous. That was the real reason he hadn't filed for divorce yet. He didn't want to be seen as a scumbag in other people's eyes. But how to frame his wife? He hadn't figured it out until now. Now everyone would know he had a mistress. At work, they'd somehow managed to keep it quiet until the last moment. Daniel's mother had made up a legend that Lenora was a distant relative of theirs. And so Daniel often gave her a ride home. They never took liberties in public at the warehouse, and they rarely spoke at all. So from this side, Daniel looked like a decent family man and took care of his relatives. Tracy was often late for work. Then the three of them would drive home. Daniel swore the last words at Carol to himself. He really didn't want the gossip. Everything was going according to plan. His mother had promised to help him get rid of his wife. Carol seemed to feel her husband cursing her. She walked toward the house, but then abruptly turned around and headed to visit Kyle. Carol greeted her classmate's mother cheerfully. It's so good to see you. The guest froze in place. She couldn't believe her eyes. No, Lenora wasn't walking yet, but she looked much better. Can you imagine? The pains are gone, she reported contentedly. I was so scared, and Kyle was too. Carol, but what have I got to lose? 5 more years of being in a wheelchair and then going to the other side of the world. I'm still afraid to believe in that miracle. Carol and Kyle walked to the workshop. The man sat down in a chair. He was overwhelmed with emotion, such joy that he couldn't even express it. Carol, I consulted someone, Kyle began. True, it's not a doctor, it's a biochemist. But anyway, he told me it's a very promising field. Something like growing bones, only not from stem cells, but from the cells of the bone itself. First, this substance fills the problematic joint. Then it expands the space a little bit and starts to fit into it. This somehow provokes the growth of new cells. I don't even know how to explain it scientifically. Do you want to continue your experiment? Carol inquired. Carol, it seems very promising to me. I'd have to get my mother back on her feet, he sighed. Serious research takes money, and I don't have any. I'm already denying myself everything to buy everything I need. I even needed high-grade gold for the rig. But if you get a patent, Carol suggested, then you could implement your invention. Who's going to give it to me? That takes serious research, not knee-jerk like mine. If I could find sponsors. But in our city, it is simply impossible. We either have beggars like me, or businessmen in the market. And these comrades are not interested in their future anyway. They don't even want a better life for their children. They live for one day, just to make more money. And yet Carol had the feeling that something would change. She returned home in high spirits. She felt like her life was making sense to her now. Carol was eager to study with Kyle, and the first thing she wanted to do was contact someone at her institute for advice. One faculty member she had once been good friends with, but that would come later. For now, the woman needed to pack her things and move in with her parents. Carol saw that her husband wasn't home. She rushed into one of the rooms and started packing her bags. The pain came over her again, and she dropped everything and lay down on the bed to calm down. Then she heard a noise. She threw her bag into the closet and hid in the corner behind the curtain. She didn't want to see Daniel so badly that some childish instinct kicked in. Someone was talking at the door, and Carol immediately recognized her mother-in-law and her husband. "Just throw my jewelry in her drawer," Tracy was saying. "And then I'll file a police report. Let them know I suspect her. Your wife turned out to be a thief. I mean, she's been visiting me, and everyone knows it." Carol opened the door, turned on the recording on her phone. The husband and mother-in-law were so startled they couldn't get a word out. "So that's it," Carol angrily threw. "Not only did you scoundrels confuse me, but you also wanted to slander me. But no more. Listen here. Everyone will know what you are and what your son is, and he's no different from you. He's a bastard like you." "Shut your mouth," Daniel lunged at her. "I'll have you now." He swung around. "Everything that happens here is seen by Kyle on his phone. He bugged me." Carol made up a story as she went along. "So any movement you make and the police will be right there." Daniel ran out of the house, followed by his mother. Carol, of course, hadn't heard that Tracy wasn't going to have her son share the house with her, as that was a topic they had discussed before the jewelry was planted. Her mother-in-law's jewelry would become a tool for their blackmail. Carol would then easily give up her share. Daniel thus accomplished two things at once. He got out clean, because now Carol was to blame for the divorce. And secondly, he was taking all the property. He pulled up sharply in front of his mother's yard. She got out and he drove to his mistress. "How I hate you so much," he whispered. "Stupid, you ruined everything." He pounded his fist on the steering wheel. Daniel stepped on the gas. He only had a couple of kilometers to go to get to Lenore. A corner appeared, and Daniel suddenly slammed into a pole at full speed. The car was a pile of metal in an instant. Everything swirled before Daniel's eyes, and he lost consciousness. "No," screamed Tracy Alexandra as her son was overtaken by instant punishment. She walked around with crazy eyes and told everyone how her daughter-in-law had cast a spell on her and Daniel. She wanted to kill him, found a lover, and thought to get rid of my boy that way. How are such people incapable of admitting their guilt? And Tracy Alexandra has always been convinced of her uniqueness. Mistakes are for the weak. That's how she raised her son. He could look down on everyone forever, make fun of others. But there's always a price. Daniel came to. His mother was sitting beside him, crying. She had already argued with all the doctors, demanding that her son be brought back to life, though she had been warned that if Daniel did regain consciousness, he would most likely remain disabled. "I mean, how's that no walking?" Tracy Alexander jumped up from her chair in the doctor's office. "It's your responsibility to get him on his feet." "But I'm not the Lord God," replied the doctor. "Besides, you can arrange in New York for money to have him operated on. We don't do such complicated operations in our city. There are no such specialists. So it's up to you." Tracy Alexander shouted at the entire hospital, threatening the prosecutor's office. "Come on, bring the prosecutor. I'll show him in what conditions we work. Maybe they will at least raise our salaries." Calmly replied the doctor. Tracy Alexandra was shaking, but she didn't realize that the doctors had already done everything they could. Daniel had survived, and already that could be called a miracle. After a few days, they allowed his mistress to visit the patient. She cried, and then decided to talk to the doctor. "Are you sure that nothing can be done? I beg you, maybe we can find some kind of cure." Unfortunately, there is no such magic pill, the doctor sighed. Prepare for the worst. He won't walk. He has serious problems with his spine. The mistress fell to the floor. She hadn't counted on this outcome at all. Lenora found herself in a very difficult position. For almost a week she thought about her future, and then she made a decision. Wade. Hi, she dialed her ex-boyfriend. I'm so sorry, Lenora cried, fake tears. I only love you. Let's get back together. Tracy Alexandra was also thinking hard. She was counting on Lenora in this situation. Daniel would get the house and the divorce. So they already had a place to live, she reasoned. I would visit them from time to time, help her out. The next day at Tracy's work, Alexandra wanted to have a serious talk with Daniel's mistress. Lenora, can I talk to you for a minute? She approached her. My girl, I don't think you're going to have any more problems with housing. You and Daniel can stay at his place or yours. It's just that if you take him in, you can sell the house and pay for the treatment. The doctor said he might get his back working and my boy will at least be able to ride in a wheelchair. Lenora laughed. Tracy Alexandra, you'll have to excuse me, but I can't. Somehow going pale, break Daniel. Lenora, are you abandoning my son? I mean, he loves you so much. Tracy Alexandra. You see, Wade came back to me, she smiled crookedly. So we're living together now. You took him back, Tracy Alexandra whispered. Lenora, how could you do that? And my boy. She sobbed. But Lenora wasn't about to change her plans. As long as Daniel had been healthy, everything had been fine. But now that he was an invalid, why would she want to ruin her life? Loving someone else is important, of course. But you can't love yourself any less. It's always me that comes first for people like Lenora. It was very hard for Tracy Alexandra to admit defeat. Things had spiraled so fast she'd forgotten all about her sister-in-law. But it was getting to her. The few times she'd gotten to Daniel's house, his wife hadn't been home. What am I going to tell her? Tracy Alexandra was working out a plan in her head. It's not like she's going to listen to me. I have to come up with something so she can't say no to me. The mother drove to her son's house almost every day. She was tired of running back and forth. Mom, why isn't Lenora coming? Daniel asked her one day. Why don't you ask her to come over and see me? I miss her. Daniel, she said as gently as possible. Do you understand? And Lenora's gone. Her mom's sick. So she has to live in the village for now. Tracy Alexandra realized that she couldn't tell Daniel yet that Lenora had left him. It might make things worse for him. Mom, call her, he asked. Please. I want to hear her voice so badly. Tracy Alexandra was confused. She left the room and dialed Lenora. I'm begging you, well, play along with him, she cried. If he finds out now that you left him, God forbid. Well, okay, I'll say a few words to him. And that's it, the ex-lover replied angrily. If Wade finds out, he'll kill me. Lenora wasn't as affectionate as she'd been before. But Daniel was somewhat relieved. Mom, did you see her? His face turned contemptuous. I don't even want to bring her up, but we need to settle on a house. I think I'll be divorced easily now. I'll probably recover for another 6 months, and then I'll go back to work. My mother didn't say anything. She knew that it would be impossible to realize all his dreams. Okay, I'll talk to her, she sighed. Daniel, let's talk about this later, after you've been discharged. Tracy Alexandra urgently needed to get Carol back. Hanging her disabled son around her neck was not for her. In words alone, Tracy Alexandra could be the perfect mother, but spending the rest of her old age caring for a sick person was too much. Carol was screaming all over the house. She couldn't take it anymore. She'd never met such mean people before. She was putting her things in a bag. In fact, Carol was in such an agitated state that she could not control herself. Finally, her hysteria ended and tears were shed. After that, the woman felt lighter. I hate it, she whispered. Carol carried some bags outside and hailed a cab. Her mother had already called several times. She was frantically worried about her daughter. No sooner had Carol laid out her things than she was called. Yes, she said angrily. She had no time to talk. The phone interrogated her first and last name. Your husband was in an accident? She was suddenly informed. He's in intensive care. The chances are slim. Carol was numb. She couldn't even believe what she was hearing at first. Mom, he was in an accident, she said quietly, and rushed over to her. Of course, Carol was very angry with Daniel, but she didn't wish him dead. Are you going to go to him, Mom asked. Her daughter immediately shook her head negatively. Mom, what's the point of all this? He doesn't love me. He has a mistress. Let her worry about him. Carol wiped away her tears. Be that as it may, Carol still wanted to visit her husband, but she held herself in check. Why? She was talking to someone in her head. If he doesn't want me, she still had feelings for Daniel, and Carol couldn't hide it. But in the situation they were all in, her coming would have looked just plain stupid even in her own eyes. She had to deal with her feelings on her own. Still, she'd talked to Daniel's doctor. She drove to the hospital early one morning before work. He'll remain disabled, the doctor said. How's the verdict? Unfortunately, there is serious damage to his spine. Since Carol now lived far from where she worked, she, like many in her town, rode her bicycle. Kyle rode up to her. Carol, come see us if you can. Really need your advice, Carol. Daniel's been in an accident, she couldn't stand it and cried. He's going to be an invalid now. You're going back to him now, consternation showed on Kyle's face. Carol noticed how his voice trembled. No, she shook her head negatively. He has another woman, and he doesn't care about me at all. The man picked up the bread and pastries and went about his business. Carol watched him go. Yes, the old jacket Kyle seemed to have worn as a teenager, the shoes with holes in them. As a classmate had told her, he didn't spend the money from his mother's pension, and that's what they lived on. And whatever he managed to earn or sell, he put into his rig. Why is that? Carol sighed. Those who live only for themselves prosper, and those who do their best for others are dragging out a miserable existence in poverty like this. Despite the pain, Carol decided to go out and accept her friend's invitation. It had been almost 2 weeks since Kyle had first administered the medicine to her mother. They hadn't seen each other much since then. Kyle said he had been very busy with work the whole time. Carol walked into her friend's house. He was smiling. It was obvious that he knew about something, and the guests obviously had no idea about it. The woman entered the room and froze in place. Standing by the window was Kyle's mother on crutches. God, how is this possible? She whispered. Come out. Kyle walked toward her. Amber Adams demonstrated a few tentative steps. Carol looked at Kyle in bewilderment. Is this a joke? She was overwhelmed with emotion. Kyle, you can't believe it. It's true. He walked over to his mother and hugged her. Well, I'll tell you honestly, if Mom recovers, we'll certainly lose something, he laughed. But I'm willing to work and compensate Mom for her pension. I'll go to work myself. If I move normally, right away, the woman replied. For so many years, I don't want to sit any longer. The young people chatted till nearly 3 o'clock. This event was a big deal to both of them. Then Kyle walked Carol home. Or rather, they rode their bikes home together. And then he came home. Carol went to bed. She thought about the patience and stamina it took not to break down like that. And Kyle, he said, had been failing for years. He'd quit for a couple months, and then, it'd be like an impulse from inside him to get up. He'd get back on track, her friend told her. Carol herself felt that now that she was free, she could do something useful. She would really like to support Kyle first. If I could find someone interested. She sighed. Then Kyle would have a chance at life. If he paid good money for the patent, it could be enough for him for years to come. Maybe someone else would invest in the invention. He had so many ideas. But again, it all came down to finances. The teacher Carol contacted told her right away that government organizations were unlikely to be interested in such a thing. They wanted everything for free. So you have to look for someone from serious businessmen. And where will you find them, these businessmen? She whispered frustratedly. It's one thing to be in New York, but it's another to be in a province like this. The next day prepared new adventures for Carol. Around 10, Tracy's mother-in-law, Alexandra, approached her stall. Panting with anger, Carol tried to be as friendly as possible. "We could talk to you," she smiled for emphasis. Carol thought it would be about the divorce or the division of the apartment, since those were still open to her. So she agreed. There were no visitors, and the woman stepped outside. She crossed her arms over her chest and waited. Carol, her mother-in-law, sighed. "You misunderstood us last time. You see, she seduced my son. It was obvious she was struggling with every word. Anyway, she's been blackmailing him, threatening Daniel. She's got some man. I'm pretty sure he's the one who beat up my son 3 days before that accident." Lenora stated that if Daniel didn't bring her gold jewelry as a gift, Tracy Alexandra held her handkerchief to her mouth. "My son would be stabbed to death. We wanted to make it look like you had my jewelry that she wanted. Like you'd taken it." Carol clearly sensed that her mother-in-law was trying to put her in a state of pity for her and Daniel. She even began to sympathize with her husband. Emotions overwhelmed her and she stopped thinking rationally. "Okay, stop," she said to either herself or Tracy Alexandra. "Now, don't make a fool of me. I wonder how it's possible to blackmail a man into sleeping with someone. That can only happen by free will. Did she tie him up, rape him?" Tracy Alexandra was silent. She tried to catch a single sensible thought in her head, but she was having none of it. "Carol, but I'm begging you. You don't leave him. Daniel loves you very much. He keeps asking, when are you going to visit him? I'm begging you." Her mother-in-law was still looking at her. "But as far as I'm concerned, your son doesn't want a mistress." "And you do now," Carol laughed. "I'm always amazed at people like that. How can you be such a creature? I mean, you're nothing. How loudly you shout it, 'My Daniel, what's the problem?' So you look after him yourself." "Carol, well, you must realize that I'm not young anymore," she said in an angelic voice. "I don't have the strength to visit him." One thought occurred to Carol, and that would be the last thing she would do for him. Tracy Alexandra cheered up. She didn't understand what Carol was talking about then, and Carol wouldn't talk to her again. To her delight, people approached. Tracy Alexandra almost sent her an air kiss out of joy. After work, Carol drove to Kyle's house. He was tinkering in the workshop as usual. Sitting on the bench was Amber Adams. She was happy, smiling, and greeted Carol. "Oh, look, I walked with crutches. Much better today," she said. Carol hugged her with delight. Kyle watched them from the sidelines. He was very pleased that his mother liked Carol. "Shall we go?" He waved to his guest. "There's something else I want to show you." "Kyle, could you help me?" Carol asked seriously. "Do you think your stuff could help Daniel?" Well, he scratched his head. "I can't say for sure. But if you think about it theoretically, yes. I mean, Mom's bones are regenerating, and so are tendons and nerve connections." "Could you help him?" Carol looked hopefully into his eyes. "If he agrees." "All right," Kyle answered without much enthusiasm. "I'll do it for you." Carol didn't pay much attention to his last words. It wasn't that she wanted to go on living with Daniel, but she clearly felt that she had to give him the chance. "Thank you," Carol suddenly ran up to the man and kissed him on the cheek. Kyle blushed. He went out of his workshop under the pretense of taking something, rushed into his room, and collapsed on his bed. He was very afraid that someone might find out about his secret. "Well, are you ready?" After a minute, he entered the workshop again. "Carol, come on, look at this." He opened an old notebook with yellowed pages. "This is a plate that is supposed to generate special radiations. Its power is small, but unlike those that now exist, such radiation should deliver the drug to the bloodstream without any interference." "Are you saying that it is possible to somehow transfer the medicine into a vein without a syringe?" Carol opened her mouth in surprise, but Kyle was pleased with her reaction. "Carol, it's all about the radiation. It sort of takes the particles of any drug and delivers them to the right place. Rex has already experienced the benefits of this new method." Carol laughed. What was Oscar injecting him with? He was very pleased by the way Kyle laughed. "It's all about the plate. It requires a special alloy. Then I coated it several times with different liquids. I have another idea. But it would require special equipment, very thin plates of quartz with other materials layered on top of them. I definitely can't do that here. The plate that I have, so far, delivers only 50 to 60% of the drug. So that's a start, too." Carol looked at this thin, unremarkable man and marveled at his intelligence. He spoke so simply about such serious things, talking about his mistakes and unprofessionalism. "Kyle, you're a genius." Carol couldn't take it anymore. She kept her eyes on him. The man blushed. "I don't know anything at all," he mumbled. "There are such luminaries, I'm no match for them." "You're wrong," he said, and that struck a nerve with her. "I'm proud to have you as a friend, and I'm sure you'll accomplish a lot." "I'd like to get my mom back on her feet," he said sadly. "Of course, it's a miracle what's happening now. But I'd like to see her walking freely in the yard, growing her favorite flowers." "Kyle, I want to get her something." Carol's eyes lit up. "I'll bring her some seedlings and some flower seeds." "I don't know anything about that," he smiled. "I'd really appreciate it if you'd look into it." It was one of the best evenings they had ever had as friends. Kyle saw Carol off. Late. "Carol, thank you." A friend said goodbye to her. "I wouldn't have succeeded if it weren't for your support." "I really appreciate it." He lowered his head. "Kyle, you're a very good friend too, and I feel like you underestimate yourself," Carol replied. Carol touched his hair. Kyle got on his iron horse and rode toward home. His heart was singing. It was May outside. The next day, Carol wanted to go to her husband's house from work. Of course, there was great anger in her heart, but she realized that she would never take revenge, especially not if Kyle's drug could help him. There were no harmful substances in it. Any doctor would have said it wouldn't work. But as Kyle himself had said, it wasn't so much the composition that was the main thing here, but the process of getting it. Carol tossed the guests into her bag, got on her bike. She didn't know how she was going to talk to Daniel, or even if the dialogue would take place. Carol waited a moment to catch her breath. She went over in her head what she was going to say to her husband. She looked into the room, and there was nothing there. That was the most important thing. Carol really didn't want to meet her mother-in-law. And Daniel was awake. You could tell by the look on his face that he was thinking about something. Lenora had told him that she wouldn't be coming to see him in the next few months. Daniel got some kind of strange premonition. "What are you doing here?" he asked his wife in horror. His cheekbones shifted nervously. "Go away. I don't want to see you." "Daniel, let's talk to you," Carol said calmly. "We're adults." "This is all your fault. Is it your fault that I'm lying here right now?" Daniel accused his wife. "Daniel, come on. You know that's a lie." She tried to calm him down. "I can help you." He laughed to devalue Carol. "You've accomplished nothing in your life except your stall. Kyle invented a special drug that helps your bones get back to normal. It's perfectly safe," the wife began. "I don't want to hear about that quack. Although I'm not surprised you cheated on me with him. You're both assholes." Daniel shouted, drool flying from his mouth. "Get out, Tahir. I wish Kyle would die sooner. That penniless hobo on his prehistoric bicycle." "Daniel," he lifted his mother. "She's been in a wheelchair for years. This is your chance." Carol tried to ignore his profanity. "Go away," Daniel shouted, and his red face said he was in a very emotional state. A nurse came running in and asked her guest to leave. Carol saw Daniel turning his head from one side to the other and shouting something. "What did his pumped-up body give him?" sighed the wife. "His psyche is so weak that his muscles could never compensate for that loss." Carol was genuinely sorry that Daniel had refused her help. She realized that it was unlikely that his mother would mess around with him. She'd already hinted at it when they'd met. "It's his choice," Carol whispered. "I did the best I could. His accident wasn't my fault. I never cheated on him." 2 days later, Carol's mother-in-law came to work again. She was no longer asking her to go back to her son. "Carol, I think you need to take Daniel's situation seriously," she said. "I'm asking you to give him the house. I can't cure him on my own." "Okay," Carol agreed. "But on one condition, you'll never be in my life again." Tracy Alexandra agreed. After the tantrum her son had thrown at her about Carol, she had no more requests or complaints for her. When Daniel's mother started this game, she felt like a real queen. But every game comes to an end sooner or later. And the one who seemed at the beginning to have every chance to win, by the end of the game lost. Everyone had made their choice. Even the accident didn't break Daniel's pride. Who knows, maybe thanks to Kyle he could have stood up, but that would have been beyond the realm of dreams. Because men like Daniel would never reach out to men like Kyle. It's beneath their dignity. It was painful to recognize that Daniel's life had no value, as he lived only for himself. And such crazy romantics, dreamers who look like fools from the outside, are capable of moving mountains. And so ended the story of Carol and her husband. After that, the woman was never again interested in Daniel's life. He was rumored to be living with his mother. A few days later, Carol met with Kyle. The man gave her a very strange look. "So are you going to help him?" Breathlessly, he asked. For Kyle, you could say it was a matter of life and death. "No, he rejected our help," she smiled faintly. "Kyle, I don't want to talk about this anymore." "I'm all for it," he cheered. "Carol, Mom made her first cake today. She really wants you to come over for a visit." "Okay," she promised Kyle. "Tell her I'll be there." Kyle's invitation lifted her spirits. Carol worked through her day so effortlessly, as if she were being held above ground by some force. "You're glowing today," customers told her. "You're in a good mood." Carol nodded at them. She really did feel happy, as if a heavy weight had been lifted off her shoulders. The evening had been so wonderful that Carol didn't even want to go home. It seemed to her that this was where she belonged. They sat in the workshop after tea. Kyle stared at his guest. His lips moved as if he were saying something. "Carol," he said quietly. "I'm like, how do I say this?" The woman stepped closer to him and stroked his face with her hand. "I love you." Kyle finally said. "I love you too," she kissed him. "I want to be your muse." The woman whispered, "We'll do everything together. I'll help you with everything." "Thank you," he touched her hair. "Carol, I'm as lucky as Rex. I'll have not only a wife, but a friend and a companion." "I believe in you," Carol said. "You will succeed. Kyle, you're a genius. You have to admit it." "I'll try," he said timidly. "I'm not afraid of anything with you." The man breathed in the scent of her hair and couldn't believe he could be so happy. 7 years had passed. "Kyle, we're here," came from the backyard. "Are you home?" Carol headed toward her husband's huge workshop. On the way, she stopped and looked at the beautiful garden. She and Kyle had managed to find a sponsor back then, after all, and Kyle had made some very good money. They had bought a 2-story house with a large lot. Amber Adams was on the first floor. She ran the garden. Carol took care of the children, but most of the time they all spent together in the lab at Dad's house. Carol gave birth to a son almost a year after she registered. And when he turned 3, they had a yearling daughter and another boy. In general, as Carol predicted, Kyle became not only a scientist but also a caring father. And despite his crazy busy schedule, he made time for his children. Now, many years later, the man was again working on the development of non-contact administration of drugs by means of special radiation. There was a businessman who invested good money in his invention. And since Kyle couldn't live without his inventions, of course he agreed. "Dad." His oldest son ran into his workshop. "We're back." "Oh," I hadn't heard his father jumped up. "How was your vacation? Did you enjoy it?" "Yes. Grandma didn't even want to get out of the pool," Oscar laughed. Why did he open his mouth in curiosity? "I'll tell you all about it later." His father took him in his arms. "Let's go to Mommy first." Hi, her husband hugged Carol. "I see the kids are excited about the water park," he smiled. "I don't know about the kids, but I sure am." Amber Adams laughed. "I'll have something to tell you about tomorrow at work." "I wish you could have come with us." Carol touched her husband's hair. "Next time, I promise." He put his arm around her waist. "But my muse, it's time to inspire me. Mom, there's something we need to discuss in the workshop. Could you watch the kids for half an hour? I promise I'll tell you all about it tonight." He smiled as the kids puffed up their cheeks. Amber Adams stared after them. She couldn't even believe that almost 7 years ago she'd been practically unconscious. And now, thanks to her son, she could not only live a full life but make up for lost time.